yet and thought to myself, I'm really excited to make this play.
Yeah, even writing the deep dive, it was the same thing. It was like, yeah, that's a good play, but here's how it can go wrong.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo Sports. And if this looks like you accidentally played the strategy show from earlier, that should make some sense because it's the exact same people. I'm Josh Engelman. Below me, Adam Scher, aka Ship My Money. We're about to take another lap through these 4 games for tonight's 4-game slate on our way to 2020. Adam, how you feeling now about this slate after putting a couple hours in?
About the same as this morning. I think that there's a lot of good options. There's also, and it's normally the case when you get slates like this, obviously they're less, a lot of the options have like kind of lower floors, I guess, than you get on bigger slates, because like every good play on this slate, I think you can point to how it's likely to fail if you wanted to. So decent tournament slate, I guess, like leveraging ownership on a bunch of guys that aren't sure things.
It's going to be a fun one. And as we mentioned on the earlier show today, we got 3 games tipping off at 7 o'clock. So we're going to know where we're at pretty quickly. That old Oklahoma City, Dallas late night hammer. People are asking, where is Laffy? Laffy took off for today and tomorrow because dude's been working his ass off for, months and months and months. But since the NFL season, just constantly doing shows, serious on the weekends. Dude needs a couple days. And honestly, he sounded like absolute garbage for the past 2 days. So it's probably better that he's just not speaking.
In search of some more lemon lime Gatorade.
I was waiting for you to take like a big old sip of lemon lime Gatorade while you did that. I have an orange one. I hope that can't get thought to be urine at any point in time.
That I think the person who filled it would have bigger issues than the person drinking it at that point.
Oh, I don't know, man. Would you be more? We don't have time for this.
We do have time for it. We just might lose a sponsorship.
That is true. Speaking of sponsorships, what's up, Yahoo Sports? They are the presenting sponsor of this show. And what I'm going to do right now is drop the link to Emacs Cash Building Blocks article for today. I'm used to dropping that link in for the previous day each morning, but today you can check it out, read that article, get Emacs best tidbits, and head to the bottom, click the link, use the promo code AWESEMO, get yourself up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. It's going to be as good as cash. You're going to be playing lower management fee contests, softer competition. I highly recommend you guys go check that out. Yahoo is the presenting sponsor of this show, the strategy show, and of the early bird. Couldn't be happier to have them. We've got 4 games up. I am going to pitch you on this first one and then scramble to go get the throat numbing spray that I accidentally left in a different room. It's phenomenal. It just numbs everything in my mouth. I couldn't be happier to have it. It's desperately needed. Graphics Jake, shout out for the $2 super chat for the backward hat fund. Yeah, I got 2 more too. Got two new hats for Christmas. Just what I needed. And a thing to hang my hats on, which is something that I'll hang my hat on.
I use the floor for that.
Normally I use the floor, my desk, the back of my couch. All of those things hold hats pretty well. But
any open space that isn't already covered in clothes.
Yes, or old cups or paperwork that I have not gone through.
Correct.
Yeah. Sounds like we'd do really well living together. Having to like swing from rings in the ceiling just to get from point A to point B. Alrighty. Houston Rockets, Denver Nuggets. Rockets 4-point favorites at home. We're starting it off with the big one. James Harden is in. Clint Capella is in. Russell Westbrook, I think, has just sort of been in all day. So I think we can move forward with that. Has anything changed for you with regards to James Harden? Anything changing with regards to Clint Capella or Russell Westbrook? Talk to me a little bit about the 3 main guys for Houston while I go run and get my numb spray.
Yeah, nothing's really changed for me there since this morning. I don't love the spot for Harden. Denver has played at the 28th fastest pace over the last month. They're in the top half of the league defensively, but it's still James Harden. It's a 4-game slate. Raw points obviously matter a lot. And I have him, I mean, it's obviously him and Luka up at the top in terms of raw points. So, especially on DraftKings where he's 10,500, he looks like a really good option. There's enough value on the slate to get there. I think that the biggest question just comes down to, are you better off going to, an extra cheap guy or just getting more of the mid-range guards into your lineup? And I think that's a pretty reasonable question. I think it's one that for me will come down a lot to projected ownership, because even if your median projection's a little bit higher by going, the stars and scrubs route and getting to Harden, you're still kind of being forced into situations where you're going to have a very similar roster construction to a lot of the field, since there's only so many ways you can go on a 4-game slate. And you're talking about 1 or 2 players having to bust for that roster construction to just totally fail. So if Harden is getting a ton of ownership, I don't mind going a little bit more balanced on this slate. But if he's not going to get a ton of ownership, especially on DraftKings, I think that, obviously he gives you a ton of upside.
We got an ownership update 7 minutes ago. As of right now, James Harden is projected for 42% ownership on FanDuel and 36% on DraftKings. That 36% is double Luka Doncic right now.
Right. And so I think that, like, in a vacuum, the 36% for a $10,500 Harden on a 4-game slate is absolutely fine. But I don't think he's like, Luka's more expensive, obviously, but assuming that you're able to make like a 2v2 or a 3v3 that isn't terrible with the other players involved, Harden probably shouldn't be double the ownership of Luka. Luka obviously he's a better per minute producer than Harden is. Harden plays more minutes, is the flip side of that. So in tournaments, I think that, getting to Luka isn't a crazy idea. And it's also not crazy to, you have Harden at 36%. You have Kyle Lowry, for example, at 22. You have Van Vliet at 17. It's not a crazy idea to just kind of forego Harden entirely and get more of that, 8K range.
It bothers me that now the ownership is basically matching my proportions of where I thought I would be. And now
right.
I'm not really excited about that in any way, shape, or form. But Harden looks good. I think he's definitely the best pay-up option and should be incredibly affordable. Would you expect him to be in your cash lineup?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because it's still kind of dependent on news. Like, we don't have Golden State starting lineup yet. Based on the assumptions that I'm making about Golden State's rotation, then yes. But there potentially could be news where it's just like, oh, well, this value isn't nearly as good as I thought.
Yeah. Okay. We've got Russ in the mid-20s. We've got Clint Capella just shy of 40 across both sites. Do either of those two things sound weird to you?
No, I think it's fine. Center is not a great position tonight. Like, I think it's probably better than the forward position, but it's nowhere near as deep as guard. And Marquise Chris is a power forward on most sites, so it's not like you're going down using him at center for value. So I think that assuming he's not on a minutes restriction, getting around 36 minutes from Capella, even though it is a tough matchup, I think that he grades out as my top center option.
That works for me. Are you looking at anybody else from Houston? PJ Tucker, Daniel House, maybe a minutes boost to Eric Gordon. We don't really know how much he's going to be on the floor, but at some point in time, you would expect D'Antoni to just play him into the ground like he plays everybody else into the ground.
Right. So one quick point on Capella. On Yahoo, Marquise Chris is a $10 center, so you should naturally have less Capella there than on like FanDuel or DraftKings.
Hell of a point.
But yeah, as far as the secondary options on Houston, I lose interest really quickly once you get past Harden, Westbrook, and Capella, because with Gordon back, it's just fewer minutes to go around. You're already talking about players that aren't very productive on a per minute basis, and now you're taking some minutes away from them. Eric Gordon's been essentially useless when both of Westbrook and Harden are playing because their minutes are staggered. So Gordon's never getting those minutes where he's out there without either of them on the floor. So I'm not really interested in anything outside of the big three.
Okay. PJ Tucker is in the teens in ownership across both sites. I'd say that seems reasonable for minutes and a 4-gamer, but I don't really have anything else to add for Houston. I can't even really compare the Houston guys to each other. It's not like I could say, hey, would you rather have James Harden or Clint Capella? I mean, that's not a question that leads itself to answers. So I think we both agree that if we're paying for someone, we're paying for Harden before we pay for Russell Westbrook.
Yes, same boat.
Okay. On the Denver side, $9,300 on both sites. Nikola Jokic is in the teens. Jamal Murray in the teens. Jeremy Grant in the teens. Will Barton getting the most love, 28% on FanDuel, but in the teens as well on DK. Seems to just be kind of casted in as a wide net for Denver. I have a lot more interest in Nikola Jokic now than I did earlier today, at least on FanDuel for 9,300. I would probably prefer Jokic to Capella. I understand the salary tier is a little bit different, but also at half of the ownership. How are you trying to manage the Nuggets tonight?
I think the ownership there is really interesting between Capella and Jokic. So we have Millsap and Harris both questionable right now. If Millsap's out, it's a usage bump for Jokic because he's being replaced by Jeremy Grant, who's a lower usage guy. If Harris is out, it's probably a usage hit for Jokic because Porter is a higher usage guy than Harris. But if we assume Millsap out and Harris in, which is what I'm assuming currently, it's a pretty good spot for Jokic. He's got a 28+% usage rate without Millsap on the floor. It's a pace up spot for the Nuggets. He's averaging about 1.4 DraftKings points per minute this season. He doesn't generally play as many minutes as Capella does, but when you consider that the matchup is a little bit more favorable for him because of the pace, I don't necessarily think that Capella should be, he's 37% on DraftKings compared to 14% for Jokic. It's another example of if you forego Harden and maybe give priority to guys like Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet, you can get to Jokic with that savings, and it gives you a little bit more contrarian lineup with a still really high upside play.
I didn't expect to like him a lot today. I really didn't. I just started taking a look at some of his rates and realized that I probably had him a little bit lower than I should have, and all of a sudden, my man Nikola Jokic starts popping up. I was a little bit heavier on Jamal Murray earlier today. He has taken a slight backseat to Jokic, but Jokic, Murray, Barton are definitely the three guys I like the most. I'm expecting to be over the field on Denver as a whole in comparison to where we're showing them. You expecting to get like a lot of Denver just in general?
I wouldn't say a lot, but I would say probably more than I expected if their ownership holds where it is right now, because I have guys like Jokic, Murray, Barton projected as, or especially Jokic and Murray projected as good to, as above average plays at their salary. Not as guys that I knew would be huge priorities for me, but with the way that I make my lineups and the priority that I give to ownership, with this whole team projected for sub 20% ownership right now, I think that I'd probably end up getting a little bit more than I was originally expecting.
Okay. Yeah, we're on the same page there. I really expected to get more Jeremy Grant, and that is just not happening. Even at 4,200 on FanDuel, I don't expect him to be a guy that I get a ton of.
Yeah, he was one where as I'm writing him up, because I kind of just assumed he was like a really good value today. And as I'm writing him up, in the deep dive article earlier, I pointed out that I think really it comes down to more the forward position is bad. So if you're trying to save money, he's a reasonable option, but nothing really suggests that he should be a great play here. Like you should get, if Millsap's out, 32, 33 minutes from him. But overall this season, 0.77 DraftKings points per minute, alongside Jokic, 0.58 DraftKings points per minute for Jeremy Grant. Not a high usage guy. Rebound numbers go down when Jokic is out there. Assist numbers are pretty much non-existent. So it's definitely someone I think to be careful with if he's going to be projected for high ownership. If he's going to be low owned, then obviously you can just kind of play the hope everything breaks your way and he gets like 4 steals game. But assuming he gets ownership as a decent point per dollar value, I don't think that the range of outcomes is really as wide as I would like at his price point.
Would you rather have Jeremy Grant on FanDuel or Marquise Chris? Chris, $200 cheaper.
Chris.
Okay. I agree. Gary Harris, just filler, right?
Yep.
And the rest of Denver is not really on the table.
Yeah, I mean, if Harris is out and Porter gets the start, then I think he's a decent value again. He's going to shoot, and he's productive on a per minute basis. Like you have Porter at 4,500, Grant at 4,600. If Harris and Millsap are both out, I would give the edge to Porter over Grant. But assuming Harris is in, I'm not really interested in Harris, and I'm certainly not interested in Porter. It also wouldn't be shocking if Torrey Craig started if Harris is out too. So just another lineup with a lot of moving parts right now.
Yep. I'm going to just stick to the 3 main guys at this point. I think that'll be best. Do you have anything else for Houston and Denver?
I do not.
That'll work. San Antonio Spurs, Golden State Warriors. Spurs 11-point favorites at home against the Warriors. This is another one where I'm feeling a little bit different than I did earlier today. We've got LaMarcus Aldridge right around 20% ownership. DeMar DeRozan right around 20. DeJounte Murray around 30 on FanDuel, 20 on DK. Trey Lyles, Derek White, both picking up a little bit of love. For me personally, Murray on FanDuel at 5,700 stands out most. I think I prefer DeRozan to Aldridge on DraftKings, but I think both of those guys are close as well. It's a pretty crowded, like mid 6s to 7s range on DK today. Trying to get that right in a sea of guys that are 15 to 20% owned is going to be tough. What do you want to do with these Spurs?
Yeah, I think the Spurs look okay. The pricing's pretty reasonable. Aldridge, I think, is in a good spot. Golden State's allowed the 4th most post-up points per possession this season. On the other hand, they are one of the lowest teams in post-up possessions allowed, but Aldridge second in the NBA in post-ups per game. So I think it sets up favorably for him. I expect 33, 34 minutes there. I like DeRozan a little bit more on DraftKings just because he's less expensive, and you can also roster DeRozan at forward, which is really valuable. So I think I'll get to probably more DeRozan than anyone on San Antonio because of his positional eligibility combined with the price point. DeJounte Murray, I think, is fine. I have him in for 28 minutes. It's a good matchup. No D'Angelo Russell means that he does have more potential for steals as well against just worse ball handlers on Golden State, which makes him a little bit more valuable on FanDuel in addition to him just being less expensive than he is. But obviously you get more points for steals on FanDuel and Yahoo than you do on DraftKings. So a little bit more appealing there.
Not really much interest for me on anybody else, whether that's Jake Puddle or Trey Lyles. Derek White, again, at 11% ownership on DraftKings. I'm not sure I see that either. Are you getting to any of the ancillary characters from San Antonio?
They're certainly not priorities. If I'm running 150 lineups, I can see getting to like a $4,100 Derek White. 2 games ago, we saw him play a handful of minutes alongside DeJounte Murray, which is obviously good for his value. Last game, he didn't at all, but that was a game where they played a little bit bigger. They were playing Aldridge at the 4. They kind of slid guys off a spot. So maybe you get a couple minutes from White there, and at 4,100, I don't mind taking that chance. You obviously still wouldn't want him in lineups with DeJounte Murray, but yeah, there's not a whole lot there, I don't think. Like, Bryn Forbes' salary has come up. Trey Lyles is whatever. Like, I have him at 22 minutes. I have him at 19 fantasy points. Lonnie Walker played over Marco Bellinelli last game, but I don't think he gets enough minutes to really matter. So it's not a whole lot outside of the main guys.
It is ridiculous that Derek White and DeJounte Murray don't play most of their minutes together.
It's frustrating the way that they've been doing it, just with basically Mills backing up Forbes and then White backing up Murray.
Guys, you're not making the playoffs. Like, I don't think that you need to run Patty Mills and Marco Bellinelli and half these guys into the ground.
I'll say it's also frustrating that Lonnie Walker is not permanently in the rotation yet.
Exactly. So silly. This is a team of like 2 distinctly different timelines, and their current timeline is not great. They are projected to be the 2nd worst team per 538 in the West, finishing with a 29-53 record. They have a 2% chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Pull the plug, guys. Pull the plug. All right, Golden State, here it comes. Let's do this, I guess. Still no word on their starting lineup that I can see. So assumptions are to be had here. This is going to be 2 different questions, FanDuel and DraftKings. So I'm going to give my FanDuel thoughts, and I'm going to throw it to you for DK. On FanDuel, we've got Marquise Chris projected for 41% ownership. He is also my favorite Golden State Warrior. That number is also a little high, though, at least higher than I would like it to be. I have a little bit more interest in Draymond than I did earlier today. He is at 18%. I don't have a huge issue getting to a little bit more than that. I'm ranking the rest of the guys. Alec Burks, Damian Lee, and then Kai Bowman at 3,700. Surprised I don't get more, but, I only have him in for 28 minutes as of right now. Adam, the floor is yours. It's going to look a little bit different, I think, starting with Kai Bowman.
Yeah, it's still so you mentioned, you had to make assumptions here. And I think that's obviously really important, but there's just so many ways this rotation can go, even once we get the starting lineup, that there's just a lot of volatility here. But my assumption is that either Burks or Pascal starts. My guess is Burks, and you get a starting lineup of Green, Burks, Lee, Robinson, and Chris. Operating under that assumption, I still have Kai Bowman playing 30 minutes off the bench. He played 37 the last time he came off the bench without Russell. I have Chris at 24 minutes. I think that he could certainly play more, but he doesn't have to. You still have Spellman. You have Smelagic. You have Pascal healthy. You have a guy in Chris who fouls a lot and will be dealing with LaMarcus Aldridge. So I think 24 is a pretty decent projection where I'm going to get to him, but I think it's just important to keep that downside risk in mind. You mentioned his ownership on FanDuel. He's projected to be the highest owned player on DraftKings right now at 49%. He's greater than a fantasy point per minute player. So he does project well. It's just that there's a very, very wide range of outcomes for him. And I think that's something that, you should keep in mind. Like, it's not like, even though they're dealing with injuries, Golden State is not short on bodies here. And Steve Kerr has shown that he's willing to run 10, 11-man rotations this season.
Marquise Chris, 49% owned on DraftKings right now. He is the chalk play of the day. Kai Bowman is at 40. You had to pick between just those two guys. Who are you taking?
So I'm running a crunch for DraftKings right now. And before adjusting anything for ownership, I'm getting Bowman as my highest owned guy. And then Chris is my third highest owned guy with Harden sandwiched in between. So I think I would lean toward Bowman.
That is like a sandwich made out of rotten bread and the highest quality meat you can find.
So my assumption is that I get to more Bowman since I have him in more lineups without adjusting for ownership, and then he's lower owned than Chris. It's just that he's $3,100, and it's not really easy for a $3,100 guy to completely fail.
Yeah. And I would be very surprised if he didn't play like reasonable minutes. 24 would feel like lower than that would feel weird.
Yeah, like I actually just lowered him from 30 to 28 just to see if that changes anything, but I don't really think that it will.
Now I can't stop thinking about eating a moldy ass sandwich with like Iberico ham or something on it. Truffles and shit. Maybe not shit. That would be more part of the bread. How many Golden State Warriors, this is going to be, ignoring your current status, how many Golden State Warriors would you expect to be in your lineups tonight?
You
7?
mean okay, yeah, I didn't know if you meant like how many would I play in a single lineup
No.
I would expect to have some exposure to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7.
Okay. Green, Lee, Burks, Chris, Robinson, Bowman, Pascal.
Yep.
Okay. Who do you like from Golden State more than DeMar DeRozan?
In terms of like who would I have more of in my lineups, or
I guess they just don't have the right salary structure. Like, would
right.
you prefer
I don't have anybody projected
Green
higher than DeRozan?
Draymond Green or DeMar DeRozan?
DeRozan.
Damian Lee or DeRozan?
DeRozan.
Okay, those are the only two guys that are like comparable in
right
salary. I think I would rather have Draymond than DeRozan, and I would agree that I would rather have DeRozan than Lee.
I only have Draymond on DraftKings at like 30 DraftKings points,
which 35.
Like, it seems low, but he's also been less than a fantasy point per minute player without Curry and Russell, so I'm not too upset with it.
I'll have that open.
I have DeRozan at like 38 for what it's worth.
37 on this guy. Golden State. Let's take. You know what? I don't know why I'm looking this up. It's not important. Ultimately, I expect to have. I'm just playing on FanDuel today, so I expect to only have 6 guys from Golden State. Although, if Eric Pascal gets ruled in as a starter, that will probably change. I only have him in for 22 minutes right now, so Not confident in that. I have no idea what they're going to do with most of these guys.
Yeah, I think Pascal's interesting at 3,400 on DraftKings because I think he's got a very wide range of outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's always really appealing when you get someone at that salary because it helps to keep his ownership in check. For example, he's only about 14% on DraftKings right now because the median projection is not going to be great. Like he could realistically play in the mid-teens or he could play in the mid to upper 20s, and we don't really know. Even if he comes off the bench, we don't know how, where it's going to end up. But without Curry or Russell on the floor this year, he's got a 23.8% usage rate. He's around the fantasy point per minute guy. It's unusual to find someone that has the kind of upside that he has at his price point and for them to be low owned. So I'm willing to take the risk that, he plays 16 minutes and doesn't work out. I think that he's one of my favorite tournament options if the ownership stays down, because it's kind of the exact opposite situation of Chris, where Chris's median projection kind of is skewed a little bit more toward, or not skewed, that's not the right word, but the downside risk on Chris isn't really as evident in his median projection, and it shows up in the ownership, whereas Pascal has a higher ceiling than his median projection suggests.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much for the super chat from James Morrison. He said, use a different opto, but always watch the shows you guys produce and really appreciate the effort and time you take to go game by game. Really helps me get an idea of the slate. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well, Mr. Morrison. Happy New Year to you. I'm going to have quite a bit of San Antonio Golden State, and more of it is going to be on the Golden State side where they have the lowest implied total of the slate. That's always the best. Always makes me feel great. Good news is we should have these lineups and everything within the next hour. Eric Pascal listed available to play at the very least. So good to know there. Toronto Raptors, Cleveland Cavaliers. Raptors are 9.5-point favorites at home. And we just got a quote from Josh Lewenberg. Nurse hinted at possible changes to the starting lineup for tonight. To be determined. No updates on the injured guys. They're still out and a ways away from returning.
I mean, that means that McCall is finally disappearing.
You would think.
Yeah. It's just a matter of who's
replacing him. They're not going to suddenly
him.
bench Kyle Lowry.
Right. It's just a matter of, are they going to start Boucher at the 4, or are they going to put Terrence Davis in place of McCall, probably, or Hollis Jefferson, but he's barely in the rotation as of last game.
Yeah, because Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Serge Ibaka, these guys aren't going anywhere.
Right.
So let's talk about these Toronto Raptors. Kyle Lowry, 7,800 on FanDuel, 8,800 on DraftKings. So we need to be very specific about the way we talk about that guy. Fred VanVleet, 8,200 on FanDuel, 8,400 on DraftKings. And then Serge Ibaka is 7K on FanDuel, 7,300 on DK. But right now, Kyle Lowry is one of my favorite, if not my overall favorite play on FanDuel today. 7,800, way too cheap given the minutes, especially in a matchup against a terrible, terrible Cleveland team. How are you looking to manage at least the big three from Toronto?
Yeah, I think that they're all, especially the guards, are top plays for me too. Lowry and VanVleet in the crunch I just did on DraftKings, I got a little above 40% on both guys. It's obviously a good matchup against a really bad Cleveland defense. Lowry leads the league in minutes played. VanVleet's 7th in minutes played this season. Since Siakam's injury, Lowry's got a 26.5% usage rate. VanVleet's a little over 28%. The assist percentage is up for Lowry as well. For VanVleet, it's about where it has been all season long. But more per minute production from those guys now that Siakam's not on the floor and the minutes are there. Obviously there's some blowout risk in this game, but all you have to do is look back to last night to see how that can go poorly if you're, not projecting, if you're trying to project like fewer minutes. So I think they both just look like really, really good plays at their salaries, regardless of site for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have just an absolute ton of Lowry and VanVleet. Lowry in particular, though. I'm a little bit lighter on Serge. I had his rates a bit too cranked earlier today, so I adjusted that, brought him down, but still going to be a big time part of my day. Do want to point out, James Harris, thank you for the super chat. He said, tripping balls right now. Happy New Year. Is Eddie on live before lock? No, he is not. Eddie is not on live before lock tonight. Lots of ownership, though, coming into the rest of the Raptors, particularly on FanDuel. OG Anunoby at 26%, Chris Boucher at 12, Terrence Davis 18, Pat McCaw 12. OG and Pat McCaw both in double digits on DraftKings as well. I am not nearly as enamored with the rest of Toronto as that ownership implies. Do you expect to get some of the extra dudes from Toronto?
OG is interesting to me just because the price point's cheap. He's facing a Cleveland team that he should be able to get some defensive stats against. But his playing time's been pretty disappointing recently. I expected him to get a lot more run with Siakam out, but he's only been playing around 30 minutes a game. We've seen several games where he doesn't close. So I think that, he could play 34 plus, but you obviously can't project him there. But the salary is cheap enough where he still looks like a decent option to me. The rest, obviously, it depends on what the starting lineup looks like for Toronto now that we've gotten word that it could be different. If you have Patrick McCaw playing 30, 32 minutes, that makes it really tough for me to get to the other guys because that's 30 to 32 minutes of Patrick McCaw running around doing absolutely nothing for DFS. Whereas if you were to get Chris Boucher in the starting lineup or Hollis Jefferson in the starting lineup, those are guys that really contribute on a per minute basis. And if you're able to give them more minutes, then obviously they become really, really good values for me. Kind of the same for Terrence Davis. His price tag's up a bit, but he's still a lot more productive than Patrick McCaw is as well.
This is going to be a really generic question, so I hope you understand where I'm going with it. But let's say they do make a change to their starting lineup. How important does that become for each one of those guys? So let's say, for example, it becomes Chris Boucher. What does he become to you for this slate? If it's Terrence Davis, what does he become? If it's RHJ, what does he become?
Right.
How big is the gap for you if you know that information?
I think it's huge especially because of the guys that we're talking about. Boucher is a greater than 1 fantasy point per minute guy. I had him at 20 minutes because he's been playing alongside Ibaka a bit, and Cleveland does have a big front court where they could do that. So I think 20 to 22 minutes would be reasonable for Boucher anyway. But if he started and you could give him 26, 28 minutes, he's going to start looking like one of the better values on the slate. The same goes for Hollis Jefferson, who's only 4,300 on DraftKings. He played 3 minutes last game, but if he's inserted into the starting lineup, I'm assuming he's playing upper 20s, and he's productive as well. So they would both grade out as great values for me if we get a signal that they're going to get more minutes than they have been.
Would any of those changes affect Lowry, Van Vliet, or Ibaka for you?
Not really. I mean, the usage would, in theory, come down a bit, obviously, when you're replacing Patrick McCaw with Boucher or with Rondae Hollis Jefferson. But because of how high I have Lowry and Van Vliet projected already, even if I lower their usage a little bit to account for that, they're still going to be two of the better plays on the slate for me.
Okay. Anything else you want to touch on from the Toronto side of this game?
I'm not getting too much Ibaka, which terrifies me, but
7,300 is a pretty big price tag, but he is the most owned Raptor right now.
Yeah, that's kind of why I think it's interesting. Like, he's getting a ton of projected ownership, and it's not like I have him as a bad play, but I think I prefer, or I know I prefer Aldridge. I think Kevin Love is comparable at lower ownership. It's just the minutes do concern me a little bit for him because he does have a competent backup. I have him at 32 minutes, which is what he's averaged in the 6 games since Siakam's injury. He's averaged about 0.98 DraftKings points per minute over those 6 games. Yeah, it's not that I think Ibaka is bad. It's just that I'm nowhere near as enamored with him as the field is.
Okay. We did get another super chat from a man with an incredibly unfortunate name, Aaron Hernandez. PJ Tucker or Jeremy Grant in a GPP, no site given.
It was Grant or Tucker?
Correct.
I might have none of either, but I guess Grant because it's a pace up spot and he's not PJ Tucker.
This guy came back from the dead. You should have these answers, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's there's just other guys I'd rather get to than either one. Yeah. But I have Tucker at 22.5 DraftKings points. I have Grant at 19.2. So going by projection, it would be Tucker. But I think because of the pace and mainly the pace, that Grant maybe has a little bit more steal upside and then could get there.
Okay. Let's go to the Cleveland side now. I don't think there's a ton to talk about here. Kevin Love is 7,300 on FanDuel, 7,500 on DraftKings. I think he stands out as, a solid option. Tristan Thompson for 6,400 on FanDuel, probably not getting as much love as he should at 13% ownership. Colin Sexton getting a little bit of love. He's projected to be in a quarter of the lineups on FanDuel. Your boy, Kevin Porter, at 17% on DK. Find something you like, I guess, from Cleveland.
Yeah, there's nothing I love, but there are pieces that I think kind of fit in reasonably well. You mentioned Kevin Porter, who I don't like tonight, but he at least kind of fits in as a value. He's only 4,200 on DraftKings. He should play 24 to 26 minutes. He gets a bit more usage now that Jordan Clarkson's not out there with the second unit. So you could definitely do worse. It's not a guy that I'm expecting to really build around. Colin Sexton looks okay. The minutes have been up with Clarkson out. He's got a 26.8% usage rate over the last month. It's still a tough matchup and not a super appealing price tag. Thompson is okay for me. Toronto actually hasn't been very good at limiting rebounds. They're in the top 10 in offensive rebounds allowed over the last month, which is appealing for Thompson, but it's still just kind of a mediocre spot, I think. And then the same goes for Kevin Love, whose minutes have been up recently. I have him at 32 minutes, but he could potentially get a little bit more. I think that I would rather, at their respective ownerships, I would rather get to Love than Ibaka, but it's not like I'm super confident in Love.
That's fair. We got news while you were talking. Warriors starting lineup. Are you ready?
Burks is in the starting lineup.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just said, yes, I'm ready. Burks, Lee, Robinson III, Green, and Marquise Chris. Let's just sort of sum up what that means to you. Does that change anything for you for Kai Bowman? Or how does it change Burks?
It's the starting lineup I had projected, so it doesn't change anything for me. I have Burks at 30 minutes. I think that potentially he could play more. I have Bowman at 28. I think you could get 4 or 5 minutes more in either direction there. It just goes back to the point that I'd said before. Even once we get the starting lineup, there are so many interchangeable pieces on this team that aren't very good. And we know that Steve Kerr is willing to run really, really deep rotations. I'm not going to have much confidence in my minute projections regardless of who's starting, but it does. If Burks weren't starting, I would have lowered him to 24 or 25 minutes. So I still have him at 30. I think he's a perfectly fine value. I have Bowman at 28. I have Pascal at 24. Robinson and Green at 32. Lee at 34.
Let's put a final bow on Cleveland and Toronto. Would you rather have Tristan Thompson or Serge Ibaka?
Ibaka.
Okay. And then we said Love Ibaka was close, correct?
Yeah, just I have them projected about the same. So at their ownerships, I would rather have Love.
How much Kevin Porter is too much Kevin Porter? What if he is the linchpin to your cash lineup?
Then redo your cash lineup.
He is at 20. Colin Sexton at 25% ownership on FanDuel feels high.
What's his salary?
5,100.
I mean, that's a really good price point.
Should Colin Sexton be the most owned Cav on FanDuel?
I have him as far and away my top Cav.
Interesting. Ahead of Kevin Love.
At their salaries, yeah.
Fair enough.
I have Love at 35.5 FanDuel points. I have Sexton at 29.5.
Okay. Big fan of Colin Sexton. Good to know. Still no other news. I don't really have anything. Is this the least appealing game?
No.
Rockets Nugs?
I actually don't know which one I would say is the least appealing because I don't think any of them are particularly appealing. They all have parts that I like. Two of my favorite plays on the slate are in that game, so I can't say it's my least appealing game.
Okay.
But outside of those two plays, it gets pretty ugly.
Okay.
I have Sexton right now as my fourth favorite point guard on FanDuel.
Really?
Lowry, Doncic, Paul, Sexton.
Sexton ahead of Murray, huh?
Not by a lot, but yeah.
Either Murray, I guess. I have both Murrays.
Those are my next two, DeJounte, then Jamal.
Okay. Guys, please hit the like button. We've got about 15 minutes here before we give way to Chris Randone and Sal Vetri as they take us all the way into 2020. So please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. We will be back in the morning, Wednesday, myself and Sal, I believe. NBA strategy show. No rest. We will be back again with, I think the slate's kind of weird tomorrow. Let up, just double check it. So there's a 6 o'clock start, a 7:30, an 8, and a 10:30. So probably be early tomorrow. 4 o'clock deeper dive, 5 o'clock live before lock with a 6 o'clock lock, but we won't know that until salaries get posted. So
there's only 4 games tomorrow?
There are only 4 games tomorrow.
Good, because dealing with trying to guess what the players did tonight and how it's going to affect them tomorrow is never fun.
Yeah, not really looking for the 11 gamer on New Year's Day because going to be a lot of IVs for some of these guys before and after the games. Don't need that in my life. All right, let's close this out. Oklahoma City Thunder, Dallas Mavericks. Mavs are 3.5-point favorites in OKC. As of right now, I'm still projecting Danilo Gallinari out. We do not have that information to my knowledge.
We don't, and I have him out as well. I don't feel strongly about that one way or the other, but
same. It is incredibly important, though.
Kinda.
Well, it's incredibly important to me because I feel like the 3 dudes from Oklahoma City, Paul, SGA, and Adams in this case, are not getting as owned as they should. So let's dive into this right now. What are your thoughts on the Oklahoma City Thunder here against Dallas?
I don't think this game is particularly great from a matchup standpoint for DFS. 2 slower teams, 2 quality defensive teams, but I think that the guys you mentioned on Oklahoma City are all good. They'll be better if Gallinari sits, but I think that they're still good plays if Gallinari's in, which is why I kind of said that I think it's kind of important. Like you get a boost for Paul, Schroeder, Gilgeous-Alexander if he's out, but the worst case scenario being you play them and he's in, like you're still not in a bad spot. Right. I think the salaries are pretty reasonable on them. If Gallinari is out, or if Gallinari's in, you lose a couple minutes off of Schroeder's projection, but he obviously still can get there. You lose some usage from Gilgeous-Alexander, but he still plays big minutes and he's still reasonably priced. So I think that they're all good plays. It's just that they get better if Gallinari sits.
Okay. Compare those plays. How are you hashing out Chris Paul, SGA, separated by $200 on DK, exact same salary on FanDuel?
I have Paul ahead of SGA, not by a really wide margin, but I do give him preference. I have him at 34 minutes. I have SGA at 36. Gilgeous-Alexander, obviously the higher usage guy. Without Gallinari on the floor this year, he's got a 28.9% usage rate. Chris Paul only at 22.9%, but you just get a lot more assists from Paul. The rebounding numbers or rebounding percentage for Paul is a little bit higher as well. And that just makes him a little bit more favorable to me, that he's contributing in the other categories. It's also not like he's capped at 34 minutes. Like we've seen games recently where he does get up to 36. So I'd give him the edge, but then SGA is my second guy from Oklahoma City, followed by Adams and Schroeder.
I go Paul. If we're talking DK, it's Paul, SGA, Schroeder, then Adams, although Schroeder then Adams could be a coin flip for me. Dennis Schroeder is 2% owned on DK right now.
Well, he's also questionable.
That's also true. Steven Adams, roughly 20% owned on FanDuel, 13 on DraftKings. But Paul at 18, SGA at 18, Adams at 22. I'm going to have a lot more than 18% Chris Paul and a lot more than 18% Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. This feels like the spot where I'm trying to get above the field.
Yeah,
I don't know where else those spots are right now.
In the DraftKings crunches I did while we were talking, which again, it was just kind of a preliminary thing, but I got to 30% Paul, which is more than the field. I got to like 9% Gilgeous-Alexander, which is slightly under. I got to 5% Schroeder, which is like double the field, and 7% Adams, which is a little bit under.
How much of an impact do you think Danilo Gallinari would have to the ownership of the guys for the Thunder right now, since they're not all that high to begin with?
I think it would definitely go up because you would get a couple more minutes projected for Schroeder. You would get a bump in usage for Gilgeous-Alexander. So yeah, I do think that the projected ownership goes up if Gallinari is out.
Do you think we have this information before lock?
Probably games at 8. Probably close to lock.
Okay. You're approaching it with him out, correct?
Yes. I do think it's a situation where we talked about it yesterday, or whatever game it was that Harden sat. I don't know if that was yesterday or the day before. One way I think that you can kind of approach it is like on FanDuel where there's no late swap. A lot of times you'll see like Gallinari's ownership won't be as high as it would be if he were ruled in before lock, but then the beneficiaries also won't be as high as it would be if he was ruled out before lock. Yeah. So if you created basically 2 sets of lineups, and then depending on your risk profile and how you want to approach it, you can play, your top Gallinari out, your top Gallinari in lineup so that, you're overweight in both scenarios.
Spurs starting lineup: Murray, Forbes, DeRozan, Lyles, Aldridge.
As expected. Yeah.
All right, let's head over to the Dallas side of this one. Luka Doncic, 10-8 on FanDuel, picking up 40% ownership. 11-6 on DraftKings, only getting to 17%. Let's just start with Luka right off the bat. Very clearly easier to get to on FanDuel than he is on DK. That 10-8 price tag, $700 cheaper than James Harden. Let's just start this from a FanDuel perspective. Would you rather have James Harden or Luka Doncic today?
I have them projected about the same. So ignoring ownership, it's Luka on FanDuel and Harden on DraftKings. But I do think the ownership numbers are interesting. On DraftKings in that crunch I just did, I got overweight on both of them. I'm apparently favoring a stars and scrubs approach right now. But yeah, I think that in terms of, optimal lineups, it's pretty much just whoever's cheaper.
$57 for Luka on Yahoo, I think, is also reasonable. I have no problem paying that much money for someone like him. I am, I guess, a little nervous about his health, but not that I'm projecting him as anything other than in. Is a little banged up as of right now. Zion Williamson, hopeful to make debut in January. That would be fun.
I'm not looking forward to that at all.
Just because of the DFS?
DFS, yep.
Obviously, if you're not looking forward to that from like a basketball fan standpoint, you're just like a real weird dude.
Yeah, I don't care about basketball.
That's fair. Kristaps Porzingis, 8,400 on FanDuel, 7,800 on DraftKings, and essentially just going under the radar. I don't really disagree either. I think he's pretty much priced exactly where he should be. And I don't get the sense that I'll be all that different from 12% of the field. What do you want to do with Zinger?
That's pretty much where I'm at too. Like he's on one hand, the power forward position isn't that strong, or the forward positions in general aren't that strong. But on FanDuel, where you have to roster 2 power forwards, you do have Marquise Chris there as value. You potentially have Boucher, depending on what that starting lineup news is. You have Ibaka, you have Love, you have Pascal. So and Aldridge. Like there's still options that I have ahead of Porzingis. And then like on DraftKings, positions don't matter all that much. So it's even easier to get the other guys. With Luka being back, I think that, we're starting to see the salary come down for Porzingis, but it's not down quite far enough to where I would want it to be.
Okay. Now that you're aware that Tim Hardaway Jr. is not going to be playing today, how do you feel about the rest of the guys on the Mavs? Are you looking at DeLon Wright, Seth Curry, Justin Jackson, DFS? Anything standing out to you from the extras from the Mavs?
Yeah, I mean, this is another one where we don't know what the starting lineup's going to be. My best guess was that Seth Curry starts, but we had JJ Barea start the second half last game. You could get DeLon Wright in there. You could get Jalen Brunson in there. So definitely news that we're waiting on. But my guess is Curry starts. I gave him 26 minutes. He's 3,900 on DraftKings. I got to around the field, which is like sub 5%.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I still just, it doesn't really change much for me because Dallas runs such deep rotations. They have so many pieces that can go in there. I ended up giving minutes to Brunson, Barea, Wright, Curry. I have Justin Jackson in the rotation. So it just is a bunch of guys where if one of them's playing really well, chances are they get more minutes. So you do at least have that upside if you're trying to get a low-owned contrarian value play on a 4-game slate. But as far as trying to project how it goes, I don't have anyone that really jumps out.
So this is really just going to be Luka, and that's it for the most part.
That's from Dallas, yeah.
Kind of gross. I think, yeah, Dallas is probably like the least appealing team. I might have to change my answer in the strategy. So,
I mean, I think it's either like Golden State would be the least Golden State or Cleveland would be the least appealing team. It's just the pricing makes Golden State. I don't even want to say appealing, but you have to at least like be considering them.
Yes, I'm well aware that like Seth Curry is better than some of the trash on the Warriors.
Yeah.
Ugh. What a wild day. All right, let's sum it up right now. Give me your favorite plays from DraftKings for tonight.
All right. I'm trying to make sure that I didn't mess up my Toronto. Okay, I think I'm back to normal now. Harden, Lowry, Van Vliet, Luka, Jokic, Capella, Chris, Bowman, Burks, Pascal.
Premium Slack. If you got any questions, feel free to get them in here in the next minute or two. We're going to have an extra 2 or 3 minutes to hit on some questions. So Adam will be at your disposal until 6 o'clock. On FanDuel for me, ranks are looking like Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul, Luka Doncic. I really like point guard just in general. DeJounte Murray and Jamal Murray both need to be mentioned. Shooting guard is going to be Fred VanVleet, James Harden, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Small forward is disgusting. Will Barton, Alec Burks. Honestly, pretty much anybody that plays small forward is kind of in play at this point. Power forward, we're looking at Draymond Green, Marquise Chris, Serge Ibaka. And at center, it's going to be Nikola Jokic. A big change for me from earlier today. Then Steven Adams, Clint Capella, and Tristan Thompson. Dwight Powell is at 13% ownership on FanDuel right now at center. Do you have any thoughts on that? That's a pretty big number considering there's only 100% to go around.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't seem great. 5K. Yeah, I mean, I have him behind Jokic, Capella, Adams. I'd rather roster $3,800 Pirtle than 5K Powell, I think. I mean, they're both. I guess I would rather go Powell just because the minutes.
I would rather have Jake Puddle.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I am getting more of him and Lyles on DraftKings than I anticipated. I think just because they're low owned and they're cheap, and I'm getting a lot of Harden and Luka. But I just kind of wanted to mention that. It's not that I have any sort of confidence whatsoever, but they're at least a little bit lower owned value options.
Okay. We got 2 questions here. How many Warriors in one lineup is too many?
I think that the way I would approach it is kind of putting them in buckets of who I don't want together. Like I wouldn't want more than 2, I don't think, out of Lee, Robinson, Burks, and yeah, I guess out of that group, I wouldn't want more than 2. I probably wouldn't want more than 2 of Pascal, Green, Chris, Bowman. Just kind of trying to think how the rotation is going to work out, because we're assuming that Bowman's the backup point behind Green, and then that Green is going to get some minutes in the front court as well. Burks should get around 30. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would want more than like 4 Golden State guys on a team.
Okay.
Which obviously is the limit on FanDuel anyway.
Final question. So kind of a tough one to answer, but I think that we'll be okay for it. If you were building 3 lineups in the FanDuel EPE contest, so the no sharks contest, would you play anyone from Dallas other than Doncic? I would say the most likely answer is no, and if it were anybody, it would be Porzingis.
Yeah, that's the most likely answer too. I'm just running my optimal lineups right now to see if I'm getting anyone else, but because I mean, in a contest like that, obviously you're not as concerned with ownership since the field's less sharp.
Yeah.
You should just be playing like really good lineups. Yeah, I'm not even getting tons of or much Luka, and I'm definitely not getting to anyone else.
Well, there we go, guys. We are done. The final deeper dive of 2019. You're going out with the 2 best people you could have had. This could have been worse. Could have been listening to Laffy smoke Newports and cough for an hour. So congratulations, guys. You got the better version of this show. Coming up immediately after this, right now, we're just going to take a quick break. Then Chris Randone and Sal Vetri are going to lead you guys to the promised land at 7 o'clock p.m. and the final live before lock of 2019. Adam, anything else?
Nope.
The man of few words. Happy New Year, everybody. Be safe. Don't get behind the wheel of a car. If you're drinking, bad decision. Today's the worst day to do it if you're ever going to do it. So don't do it. We're out of here. Good luck tonight.
now live before lock with Osmo.com. Chris Randone, Sal Vetri here. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. 4-game slate tonight, guys. Got 1 hour till lock. What's up, Sal? Happy New Year's Eve, man.
Yeah, man. Happy New Year's Eve. We get the official last show of 2020 here on Osmo. It's pretty cool.
Damn, going out with a bang, man. We just wrapped up NFL for the year, and now we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this NBA season for the last final show, man. How's it feel to be a part of this? I feel like we got to celebrate in some way.
on air champagne. I don't know how that'll go over.
Yeah, you said you're going to a corn drop tonight.
No, let's let the people know this isn't a corn drop. It's like an acorn drop. It's pretty much a ball drop here in Raleigh. So I don't know. It's my first time here. I'm going to check out what it is, but it's apparently popular.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard corn drop, and I was just like, man, I've never done that before. So I wanted to see if anyone in here watching ever been a part of that. But before we get into it, by the way, our sponsor is not the wonderful Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. It is Fantasy Draft tonight, guys. So use that promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO. If you haven't gone over to Fantasy Draft yet, don't forget that rake-free opportunity of being a part of Fantasy Draft. They give you that luxury to not have to pay rake, which for any DFS player is pretty important, considering Alex ran the stats, and there's been cases where we think that it's more than that, but typically 30% of someone's bankroll usually goes to rake. So if you haven't signed up yet for Fantasy Draft, use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, and get over there. They have some really good tournaments. They have a lot of good action. But 4-game slate, Sal. There's a little bit of news that we're waiting for. Denver, which is the first game that we'll talk about, playing at Houston. Right now, we're waiting on word of Gary Harris and potentially Paul Millsap, who are both questionable right now, game time decisions. Russell Westbrook and James Harden coming back now from a 1-game absence. Nothing really important as far as injuries on the Houston side. How do you feel about this game, man?
Yeah, so I think just moments ago we got the news that kind of the opposite for both of these guys. So Gary Harris is ruled out, and Millsap is available to play. So I expect him to start. We just got the lineup too. So Millsap starting at the 4, and Torrey Craig is starting in place of Harris, which is something that I thought was possible and probably a really good chance of happening. So pretty much what happens there is Jeremy Grant, who I thought was a decent value coming into this, is just now nothing at that point. You're going to drop his minutes. Millsap becomes nice if the ownership doesn't rebound enough. So yeah, I think the biggest news is just Torrey Craig joining the starting lineup, and not much interest there. I mean, he's like a 0.66 fantasy point per minute producer. But if the ownership doesn't pop up, and let me just find out what you get on the price point. At $3,000 flat, let me plug this in. So right now, not much interest there, but probably the most interest and more interest for me pulls to just like the surrounding pieces of Will Barton and Jamal Murray a little bit more. But I'm going to plug in just Torrey Craig in minutes and see what happens in some crunches.
Small forward position, specifically on FanDuel, is pretty gross tonight. And if Gallinari is out as well, which I don't know I don't think the lineup has came out yet, but I mean, if he's out, it's pretty much just like a 2 or 3 man show, in my opinion. I really like Will Barton. Love Alec Burks now with him being in the starting lineup. And I do like a couple shares of Glenn Robinson. But outside of Will Barton and maybe potentially Torrey Craig, how do you feel about going to the Joker here on center? And probably speaking from FanDuel more than DraftKings per se on this situation.
Yeah, so it's interesting because with Millsap in it, I think it hurts Jokic a little bit more. And I liked where the ownership was on him. Still is going to come in low, but just not as much of a stability and sort of being contrarian there just because of Millsap being in. He's just much more active in a lot of different areas than Jeremy Grant would be out there. So I still think it's a nicer play when you're just considering ownership, especially with Clint Capella being just the main dog right now at center. Based on how you go at lineup construction, I'm getting to not that much Jokic right now, and I'll probably get to a little bit less once I update this for Millsap being in. So right now I'm going to be away from it. I think it's a fine contrarian spot to go away from, but I'm just building lineups differently.
And then from the guard position with Harris out, how do we feel about Jamal Murray, man? On DraftKings, looking at him right now, he's 6,800. A lot of good options at guard here with Paul being a little bit more pricier than him. Then you also have Lowry, Westbrook, and I mean, there's obviously going to be the cheap value plays like Kai Bowman. But Jamal Murray, man, 6,800. Do you see yourself going there in any way?
Yeah, I'm getting to some Jamal Murray. It's not a lot right now. It's behind a lot of really just some of the popular guys right now. So Jamal Murray for me comes in as a guy that I'm getting right around 15% of. So it's nothing crazy what I'm getting on him. He projects out to just be like a fine value, around 34 points for me, right around the 5x spot. So Jamal Murray for me at that price tag. It's just other guys that I'm going to be getting to in similar spots, mainly the Thunder guards and SGA and Chris Paul.
I want to talk about just this overall game flow for a second, and really kind of look at these two teams because they're polar opposites when it comes to pace. Houston, second fastest team in the league. Denver, second slowest team in the league. Obviously a pace up spot here for Denver, but 224 over under, which comes in at the highest of these 4 games. And so my question to you is how do you think this game actually plays out as far as pace and possessions? And will we see that normal fast pace for both sides, or do we see Denver kind of slowing it down and playing the ball that they want to play?
Yeah, so right now I have this projected out to be on this slate, at least the 4-game slate, the fastest projected game. For the most part, all 4 of these games are pretty similar. It's about a possession more per team above the league average, maybe a little bit more than that. So, yeah, I think it'll be a nice pace up spot here for Denver. It's going to be slightly paced down for Houston, but shouldn't impact Houston as much. It's not a drastic pace down. So just a nice spot for Denver. So when you talk about Jamal Murray, that's why he gets a little bit of a boost for me today. Torrey Craig filling in naturally will have a little bit more of a boost than he normally does. It's not great for him, but the guy that I think it really affects and who I'm expecting to see just with the ball in his hands a little bit more maybe than usual, at least taking a couple more shots from the up beyond the arc, would be Will Barton. He moves up a little bit for me after the no Harris news. I was already preparing for this a little bit, so I do like Barton. With Paul Millsap out there, the rebounding rate might drop a little bit, but have a decent shot decent shot boost for him, about 1.5 right now. So yeah, I get to the most Barton right now from Denver.
One guy I want to speak of real quick in this game that I would have liked probably a little bit more, and I'll ask you what you think on it if Millsap was out. But I still think that maybe Michael Porter can get some sort of consideration as just like a filler or a cheap play, depending on if you're going stars and scrubs. But I mean, the last 2 games has got some great time on the floor, and with the way that this matchup bodes, it kind of fits him well for kind of fast break point opportunities. And for isolation opportunities as well. I mean, with Millsap back, do we see Michael Porter getting hindered at all based on what we saw the last 2 games as far as his time on the court? Because even with Jeremy Grant starting in one of those games, Porter still not only outshined him in minutes, but as well as opportunities on the floor.
Yeah, I think just Millsap being back will hurt it. And then just with him not in the starting lineup anymore, the minutes aren't secure. I have Porter right now, and it's not anything that I have strong on, but around 18 minutes of play. It could easily be back to 10 minutes. It could easily be a little bit more than that. But at that point, I'm okay with that. In those 2 games where you saw the minutes spike a little bit, the last game he started, played 26. He shot 80% from the field. The game before that, where he played 19 minutes coming off the bench, he shot 57% from the field and 60% from 3. So just really hot shooting for a guy who is nowhere near that productive and now out of the starting rotation, with the price point also coming up from being flat minimum to now 4,500. I don't have any Porter right now, and I probably expect it to be that way, barring any other news on this slate.
How many shares right now are you looking at, or as far as ownership for yourself in regards to Westbrook and Harden?
Yeah, Harden, I am very much so. So I think there's 2 stances that you could take tonight. You can go, and Harden's ownership isn't crazy. It's around I think 35% on the latest update. I think pushing 40%. Right now it is down to 23% based on 1 minute ago. There was an update. So I like that. I'm way above the field right now. I'm right around about double the field. I'm about 64% of James Harden. I feel fine about that. And what that's doing is just doing the inverse. It's making me not get to a lot of Russell Westbrook. I have 10% Russell Westbrook right now.
All right. So Westbrook's more of the fade than Harden.
Yeah, just Harden being in at that price point. And I'm playing, this is talking exclusively for myself, at least on DraftKings, at that 10-5 price point. It's hard to ignore. I was going to get away from it if we would have seen anywhere around 40-50% ownership on this 4-game slate. I'm kind of surprised to see it lower, especially with all the value that we have, but it seems like people are maybe going a little bit more balanced than I thought.
I do like the ownership as far as Westbrook on FanDuel. And if it does continue to go down a little bit more, I don't mind that there is for a leverage spot. But as of right now, it's pretty hard, especially with Doncic now in the lineup. And with Dallas not really having many other options. It's just hard to not look at Doncic and want to roster him at 10-6 on FanDuel. Anyone else in this game that you want to speak of, or anything else we should take note of?
So I do think now that Millsap is starting, that he's actually a really nice play. And if you were building lineups around Jeremy Grant, it's an easy pivot just to get right to Millsap. They have the same eligibility. They're in the same 4K price range. I think he's fine here. He grades out as an okay value. And I think that you end up seeing, just even if he was going to be active all day, probably the ownership not be there a ton since we have all the value in Golden State right now. But I think it'll be there even less with the news that he's going to be starting in the last hour. So I think Millsap's a fine value to get to. Probably hurts Jokic a little bit.
I mean, how much time on the floor do we expect Millsap to play, though?
I'm going to project Millsap right now for 24 minutes unless anything comes out about him being on some sort of a limit.
Okay. I have him at a little bit less. I mean, it was a lower body injury, and sometimes typically what we'll see is about 18 to 20 minutes usually. I mean, if someone gets back in, I mean, and when you look at really what he's done, he only usually plays 19 or 20 minutes. I think there's only been a couple times where he's exceeded 24 minutes over the last, I think, like 12 games. I think it's 2 if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know. I'm still on the fence with him, especially with Marquise Chris there. Draymond is someone that I'm starting to look at. And outside of that, though, it gets kind of skewed if you look past Ibaka and Love at the power forward position. But the next game up is probably a game that we're going to see a lot of ownership come from, especially from the Golden State side. But Golden State going into San Antonio, 217 over under. We know Russell's out, Looney, Willie Cauley-Stein. And so we got the lineup: Burks, Damian Lee, Glenn Robinson, Draymond Green, and Marquise Chris. And I know the show before ours on Deeper Dive, I mean, there was a lot of emphasis on Marquise Chris. So how do you feel about Marquise Chris and also these other guys over here at Golden State?
Yeah, so I mean, getting the lineup was big, especially getting it a little bit earlier to kind of just finalize some things. But yeah, Chris starting at center was expected. And right now I have Chris for 24 minutes, and I feel good where he is right there. The ownership's clearly following it, and it's really easy to get away from it, I'll say. But I'm currently getting a lot of Chris. He is right now, if I pull it up, Chris ends up being my third highest owned player on the night, behind Bowman and James Harden right now. I think that's where I'll probably end up staying. It's just a really cheap player who's a good fantasy point per minute producer. They're down 2 of their bigger bodies. Really, all of their minutes at center are gone. You haven't seen Spellman picking up minutes. He'll be forced into minutes tonight, but Chris is clearly ahead of him. All the ownership's following it. So if somebody wanted to tell me, I'm just going to get away from it because there is Eric Pascal there that can pick up minutes. There is Amari Spellman. Chris can get into foul trouble, something that he does quite often, has to go up against the guy who backs down a lot in LaMarcus Aldridge. Then, yeah, I don't think it's a terrible idea. But right now, Chris is coming in as my third highest owned player. I like the spot. And at the price point of 4,100, I think it's okay.
With Alec Burks starting, does your opinion on Kai Bowman change at all? And also, does this ownership kind of scare you if that means that he's coming off the bench? Because I mean, he's almost at 50% now, but he is 3,100. Obviously, we'll definitely see considerable time on the floor as a backup. But does it change as far as him not being in the starting lineup in any case?
No, I wasn't expecting him to be in the starting lineup. I thought they can go a couple of different ways. The way that they went with Burks, obviously he could have also started, but then we didn't see that last time when Russell was out. But I also thought that they could have done what they've done in the past and start Draymond at the point, and then you end up getting an extra big into the lineup, but not needing to do that today. At least they don't think they have to. So, yeah, with him coming off the bench, nothing really changes for me. I have him projected if he was going to start for around 32 minutes. Now I have him projected for 28 minutes, but nothing changes because of the price point. He's projected for me for about just under 21 fantasy points. And at that mark, I'm going to get a lot of him. Right now I have more than the field. And I think there's 2 spots that you can go on this. I probably wouldn't try and match the field, but I have more than the field on him. He's my highest owned player. I had Harden at 64%. So I have a ton of Kai Bowman right now. And that seems very scary, but I have him projected for 28 minutes and there's just a ton of minutes to go around. And again, coming off the bench doesn't really change much. It's the way that I expected it to go.
Glenn Robinson's 4,400 on DraftKings, 4,600 on FanDuel. Obviously, he'll have a lot of time on the floor. He usually plays at least 30 minutes, averages about 32 minutes a game. But I mean, he's only a 0.71 fantasy point per minute type of guy. Has shown flashes, though, of opportunity there. But I mean, he's fairly cheap. So any love for Glenn Robinson here in this matchup?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's sort of just, so he's not like one of the priorities. He's sort of just one of the other guys on this Warriors team out of all the values. He's behind Bowman. He's behind Chris for me. he also ends up falling behind really a lot of these guys, Burks, Lee, even Pascal. That's when I start to get to Glenn Robinson. I currently have 12% of Glenn Robinson, and it's going to end up coming in below the field, and there's nothing against him on that one. It's just I rank him a little bit further down based on the position that he plays and kind of structuring him in. You know what you're going to get. He's starting at the 3, probably 32 to 34 minutes, around a 0.7 fantasy point per minute producer. He can have those spike 30-point nights, but more times than not, he's going to finish with somewhere around the low 20s. So at that point for me, I'm going to come in below the field. Some of these other guys are actually seeing some role changes. I don't think a lot changes for him in this instance.
And then on the San Antonio side of the ball, DeRozan's price now after the last 3 games of him kind of getting into a groove has creeped back up. He was definitely cheaper than what he should have been, but he's in the 7K range now on both sites. So what are we doing with the DeMar DeRozan here at the shooting guard position?
Yeah, so as of right now, I'm basically matching the field. He comes in at 26.4% for us at Awesemo at the ownership, but then I have 27% of DeRozan right now. So it's a spot that I feel okay with. It's just easy to get him into lineups. The price point's still fine on him. I think he is currently my favorite spurt to get to. He's the one that I have the most of, and it's just shooting guard, small forward eligible, easy to get there. The matchup I think is completely fine for him. If anything, really good. I would like to see him just be. He's a guy who's going to drive a ton when he has the ball in his hand, be dominant with it. You like to see just more shot attempts out of him. With Murray starting, that hasn't been the case, but at the price point, it's not really hurting him on this type of a slate. I think the ownership is completely fine where he's at. So I end up just matching it. If you were to get more, it's not a terrible idea and might be something that I try and do during the show.
Just got to update. Eric Gordon will be limited to 25 minutes tonight. Don't know if we spoke on him, but just to, update anyone that is looking to roster Eric Gordon tonight. LGA, he's 8,200 on FanDuel. This position on FanDuel is a little bit somewhat interesting because, you have 3 or 4 top guys, and then it just drops. There's really no mid-range. It just goes straight into the 4s and upper 3s as far as who you want to roster. So is LaMarcus Aldridge a priority tonight?
No, at least not a priority for me. I still think it's a fine spot. He's priced in a range where you end up having Clint Capella right there. You have Kevin Love right there. All these players are pretty much spreading out, even Serge Ibaka. All these players are pretty much spreading out ownership, pretty balanced for me at least, a little bit more of Serge Ibaka than the rest. But he's a guy that I'm getting to right now at about a 25% clip, relatively around the field. I think it's a little bit above the field, I guess. I think it's fine to get to. It's a spot where he has a good matchup. These guys filling in a Marquise, Chris, it's no match for Aldridge. He can back them down easily. He can get them into foul trouble. So it is a nice spot for Aldridge tonight. I think that the field is there. I'm slightly above it. Not a priority, but I think it's one of the spots where out of all these guys in the 7K range, they all seem really appealing. So if you were to kind of judge the ownership between what you're getting right now to Serge Ibaka and Aldridge for me, I would, based on the field, I would want more Aldridge right now and relative to the field. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I have a lot less Ibaka than what the field is getting to.
One guy that I really have kind of drawn to over the last couple hours is Jakob Poeltl. And I say that because he's 3,800. Definitely could be a filler. I don't really know what to do with the center position yet. Outside of Jokic, Steven Adams, yeah, there's upside there. Don't mind it. I know ownership is going to Powell right now. Plumlee coming off the bench. I don't really know how I feel about that. Spending time with Jeremy Grant and also Michael Porter. But Jakob Poeltl, he's 3,800. This matchup, we could see probably a little bit more of an extended run from him. And if it is a blowout, which I'm not sure if this game can stay competitive, he could see some extra minutes as well. But with really not much of a front court presence there for the Warriors, do you like him at all? As far as just a cheap play, not a priority per se, but if you're doing multi-entering and you're in a GBP format, can he be considered for a filler?
Yeah, I think if you're entering 150, you should have some of him. He's just a guy who's a fantasy point per minute producer. He's cheap, a good matchup, like you said. I have him projected right now for 18 minutes of play. He ends up coming in around 19 fantasy points. So, when you're comparing that to other guys, very similar, different position, but Eric Pascal is going to pick up more ownership than Poeltl right now. It's nothing crazy to make me try and pivot away from it. It's like 5% difference, but the way that it's coming in, they're going to grade out for similar points for me. There's just a clearer path for guys like Pascal to get more minutes here, at least more consistently. So yeah, right now Poeltl's coming in at 8%. I have 4% of him, so I am below the field, but it's a point per minute guy, a guy who's not picking up as much ownership. But I don't think he should, based on just where you expect the minutes to come from out of the Golden State guys.
Staying healthy for Pascal has obviously been a concern probably over the last 10 games, has really come down to earth. Played a couple of minutes here and there, but his playing time has been sporadic. He's been injured. He hasn't played the last couple games. He's 3,700. You mentioned his name, but really, I mean, what could we expect from Pascal tonight in this matchup?
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite spots on the slate to target. So you have this entire Golden State team just picking up ownership. A lot of the values picking up ownership. And I think a little bit more than probably the field, at least the ownership's coming in on some of these guys. I'm above it, and I feel okay about it. But the minutes can go a lot of different ways. And Pascal's one of the guys who's not picking up ownership. But yeah, he's not starting. And if he was starting, the ownership would have probably followed it. But he's going to come off the bench. He's dirt cheap. I have him in for 22 minutes, and those minutes can become 18. They can become all the way up to 30, depending on how these rotations go. We just don't know. But even at 22 minutes, he grades out as a fine value for 3,400, and there's upside there. So yeah, where the field is right now relative to guys like Glenn Robinson, some of the other players on his team, even Marquise Chris, to an extent, he would probably directly take some of his minutes if there was foul trouble. I actually like Pascal. Now, it's not anything severe. I'm coming in probably about 10 percentage points higher than the field.
Where does he grade out for you as far as power forwards tonight? Where does he match up as far as like top 5, top 10?
Yeah, I'll pull that up now. So, I mean, it's down the list. So power forwards, at least on DraftKings, he is my 8th owned guy.
Would you rather have him or Jeremy Grant?
Now with the news that Millsap's starting, I would rather have Pascal.
Okay. Other than that, I mean, outside of these two guys in DeMar and LaMarcus Aldridge, any love for maybe Murray at the point guard position on FanDuel? I mean, he is in the 5K range. So, I mean, this probably is a great matchup for him. But, I mean, what really could we expect tonight out of Murray in this matchup?
Yeah, I like this spot a lot for him. It really comes down to how many guards can you fit into your lineup. All the values seems to be at guard, and a lot of it at the top end as well seems to be at guard when you're trying to pay up, whether it's Harden, Lowry, even Chris Paul. So at 5,900, I'm just finding it a little bit more difficult to actually get to him, but he grades out fine. I have him in there for 28 minutes, grades out for around 31 fantasy points for me, and a really good matchup here. So we know what the ceiling is on this guy. The floor, though, it's a really GPP type build. So trying to get to Murray in cash games doesn't feel great. The guy could end up just playing 26 minutes tonight, not being as productive. But if you do get that 30-minute game out of him in this matchup, it's great. I'm going to get to right now, if I look at it, I'm coming in at 28% DeJounte Murray, which relative to the field, I believe is a little bit higher. So I feel good about that tonight. The matchup's really nice, and the price point's probably $400 too cheap.
All right. Before we go into these final two games, don't forget, for anyone in here that hasn't signed up with Awesemo.com yet, just a nice little friendly reminder. You can always get 50% off your first month if you're looking to try out any of the tools and resources from the number one player in the world himself, Awesemo Alex Baker. Just use the promo code live before lock. Go ahead and get yourself 50% off your first month, and give it a try. It gives you a breakdown on the landing page if you want to just see what you're getting involved in before you get it. But don't forget, 50% off your first month. All right, so these final two games. This next one, I mean, I'm probably going to only just speak of one side of the ball. I don't know how much Cleveland you like in this matchup, but Cleveland at Toronto, 217.5 over under. We know Norman Powell's out. Siakam's still injured. Gasol obviously is out as well. And so looking at this lineup, don't have it yet, but someone mentioned, I think in the last show, that Nurse was maybe going to flirt and play around with this lineup a little bit, make some changes. Could see McCaw coming out. Maybe OG not being in the lineup. I'm not sure. This could be some love for Terrence Davis to get some more extended run. He's been great off the bench. Where are we going at in this Cleveland-Toronto game, if at all?
Yeah, so I think that if anything was to happen, it would end up being with McCaw. It just seems like the piece that is most evident to come out, and really the piece that they can – you're not going to be sitting anybody else in those starters. It's just too expendable, in my opinion, based on what you have on the bench. So I would expect it to be McCaw, if anything. And that would actually change the slate depending on who steps in for him, whether it's RHJ or Chris Bouchard. They would become a lot more appealing for guys who are fantasy point per minute producers or close to it. So waiting on that's going to be important. But for the rest of this team, at least, yeah, Serge Ibaka's picking up a lot of ownership right now. It's come down throughout the day. I think it's now into the 20s, which is right around where I've been on him. But when it was up there around the 40s, it wasn't something that I was as thrilled about. But 7,300, I have him in for 34 minutes right now. Depending on what you put him in for, 32 or 34, it'll really change your ownership on him. I was playing around with that earlier, but I have him at 34. This game, if you're somebody who wants to put him at 32 because of maybe just the widespread, it doesn't stay as close, and that makes sense because he will be one of the first people probably off the court just due to their depth right now at big. So Ibaka, I think, is completely fine. I'm getting right around LaMarcus Aldridge of him. So based on ownership, I prefer LaMarcus Aldridge if you had to pick one of them. But I'm getting about 25% of both of those guys. So when you get to the guards, this is a spot that I like a lot. So you can get balanced tonight if you go away from Harden. In those types of lineups, you can get to Van Vliet, you can get to Lowry's, pair both of them together. They're just playing huge minutes, 38 to 40 minutes. Both of them are guys that I have at a decent clip right now, top 5 owned guards. And I don't have any rules set up to not get to both of them in the same lineup. I have 26% of Fred Van Vliet, and then I have 22% of Kyle Lowry right now.
We just got an update with the Thunder saying that Gallinari and also Schroeder will not have a minutes restriction tonight. So I guess Danilo will be in the starting lineup. Haven't seen the starting lineup yet. Don't know if it was announced. I haven't gotten the alert, but that was an announcement just made.
Okay, yeah. So pretty much the only change there is what they were getting at power forward was just kind of empty minutes, at least for fantasy purposes, from guys like Baisley. I also saw, that Diallo is going to be back, so they're almost at sort of a full strength when it comes to all of their depth. Diallo being back doesn't really matter as much since Dennis Schroeder is going to be in. They also have Terrence Ferguson back, so that doesn't really change too much. But I think that this does impact, obviously, Gallo. If his ownership doesn't rebound, I think it's a nice spot to target. You also have, when Gallo's off the court, Gilgeous-Alexander just sees more overall usage. Point per minute production goes up by about 0.1, which is pretty significant. The ownership wasn't following SGA right now, so it's not something you have to pivot away from. But if I put Gallo in for 32 minutes right now at that price point that he's at, and probably the ownership doesn't rebound anywhere near as much because it's still not a smash play, but you're going to get lower ownership than you should on him. So I'll probably end up getting more than the field just naturally. I'm going to put him in for 32 and see what happens here.
If his ownership does bump up a little bit, or if it does stay down, first off, will you have more shares of him?
Yeah, because so before any of the news came out, I think we were projecting him for 5% owned, but I'm sure that's going to change based on him starting. If he was to stay at 5% owned, I would have a lot more of him right now.
And then what about Chris Paul? Does this change anything with Chris Paul as far as his usage or anything in regards to scoring opportunities, anything of that nature?
Yeah, so for SGA and Chris Paul, it affects SGA a little bit more. I think it's just going to affect one of them more, but I think it's the same for both of them. Yeah, a little bit more productivity. When Gallo has those bigger games, it's going to impact them. I mean, all NBA players are going to.
We got some more news, and I knew this was going to happen, man, based on what I saw the last few games. But OG will be coming off the bench. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson starting.
Okay, yeah, so that's really big news because right now Hollis-Jefferson, I think, is 4,300. He's a guy who's pretty close to a fantasy point per minute producer. When you're getting him in a spot right now, I imagine he's going to end up starting at. So they still have McCaw out there. That's interesting. So where he's going to be starting, he's just going to have great matchups, whether it's against Chetty Osman, whether it's against Kevin Love. So RHJ at 4,300. Yeah, I'm going to try and see upper 20s in minutes. If I had to just spitfire a minutes project right now, I'd probably put him at 28 minutes. And at that point, at 4,300, he's going to become one of the better. I wonder if I imagine, okay, so we just got the lineup now. It's Lowry, Van Vliet, McCall, Hollis-Jefferson at the 4, and then Ibaka at the 5. Yeah, at 4,300, that's hard to ignore, especially playing that close to the basket. 28 minutes is what I'll put him in for, and he'll become one of the better values on the slate.
Yeah, I said I hate his last name, but OG. When I mentioned about him earlier, about him potentially getting getting removed from the starting lineup, I mean, he hasn't played well at all in these last 3 games. Flirted with foul trouble early, unnecessary fouls. Wasn't getting a lot of time on the floor, but also turning over the ball a lot. I think he has 7 turnovers in his last 2 or 3 games, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this is interesting now because I mean, this kind of opens up a little bit, as far as locking someone in cheap at the power forward position. And so I guess my question to you is this. I mean, there's a couple of things here. One, will we see ownership rise on RHJ? And 2, does Chris Boucher become a play at all?
Yeah, so not much changes for me for Chris Bouchard. I think that RHJ's ownership, yeah, it's definitely going to rise. You have a half hour for a lot of these things to change, and it's just a clear value at this point at 4,300. Even if people aren't using projections, just whenever you have a productive player, and again, just no Pascal, no players down there really. Ibaka's not going to fully take away rebounding chances and scoring chances from RHJ. Whenever you have a value that's opening up closer to the basket, I mean, it's huge, especially with this type of production that he can get to. So I have him in for 28 minutes right now. He grades out really well. He grades out for right around that many fantasy points for me, so a little bit less. It's a spot that I'll be getting to a lot of him, and I imagine the field rebounds. But now you have a really nice pivot off of. I would get to RHJ over the range of if you were floating on Jeremy Grant and you went to Paul Millsap, or even if you didn't, now you can get to RHJ. Feel pretty good about that. I think RHJ, depending on where the ownership comes in, you can feel comfortable pivoting off Chris to go to RHJ. You can play both of them. It's completely fine. There's a lot of value on the slate right now. And the more that I think about it, the more I think it becomes viable to start getting to those lineups with the two studs in terms of Luka and Harden together.
What about OG being in the 4K range, 4,900 on FanDuel? Obviously, if there was any ownership on him, I'm sure it will come down now with him being removed from the starting lineup. So could this be a sneaky play? And also, what kind of minutes now do we see from OG with him coming off the bench?
Yeah, I had him at 32 minutes. And even at those 32 minutes, he wasn't projecting out great for me. It wasn't really somebody I wanted to get to. He can get the thing is he can get those 36, 38 minute games. So he was still going to be in a player pool for me, but he needs every one of those minutes to just get there. Now with him coming off the bench, there's no way he hits those spike games around 36 to 38 minutes, barring some sort of injury or weird rotation. And them making this change, I don't think they're going to do that. I think this is a clear situation where they don't want him in the starting lineup. So somebody who offers a lot of defensive help, I think that you're going to end up getting OG probably playing. I mean, it can drop all the way down. I ended up dropping him down to 20 just because it really won't matter for me. It'll put him to a few enough fantasy points into the teens that I don't get too much of him. So at this point, he's not going to be somebody in my player pools.
From the Cleveland side of the ball, we haven't really touched on anyone. But I mean, obviously, the main guys to look at, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, as far as the front court. Maybe Colin Sexton if you want to consider him. But I mean, really anywhere else. And also, are there any opportunities with these guys that you're looking at with Love, Tristan, or Colin Sexton?
Yeah, so I think the one that stands out the most is going to be Love for me. And then actually Sexton before Tristan Thompson, just based on the way that the slate plays out. I'm getting to less Love than the LaMarcus Aldridge and Serge Ibaka range. So none of them are priorities. Love I have about 20% of right now. When I go to Tristan Thompson, I'm getting just right now of Tristan Thompson, I have like a couple of shares. I have like 5% of him, 4% of Tristan Thompson. And then with Colin Sexton at point guard, I have about 8%. So I'm not getting much of this team. I think it's the most unappealing team on the slate where Kevin Love's ownership is coming in the recent minutes he's been playing. I'm not putting him all the way up to those 35 range, but I have him at 32. He does grade out nicely. So I feel okay getting to the 20% where he's at right now. It's just this slate is a lot of guys who grade out similar. I have Aldridge, I have Ibaka, I have Love. All of those guys just seem like the same exact player projection wise to me. They all seem like guys who can play 34 to 36 minutes today. So I'm just getting about 20 to 25% of all of them.
Outside of them, I mean, is there anyone else that we can consider here for GBP purposes or even cash game?
Let me just see if I have just any others in anything that I have. So no, it's just, for me, it's Love, then a little bit of Sexton and barely any Tristan Thompson.
By the way, someone mentioned, I've seen this multiple times, but how many Golden State Warriors are too much for one lineup tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I was getting to some earlier today with 4, and that sounds terrible. But now with RHJ opening up, I think that you can still get to 4 and probably more so a cash type build. But I think that most of mine will have probably anywhere between 1 and 3, 2 and a good amount of them.
Is tonight a more balanced approach or a stars and scrubs type of approach?
Yeah, so I think really, so which way I'm going to lean is stars and scrubs, especially as more value continues to open up. But I think balance is completely fine. You have so many guards. You have whether it's the Toronto guards and Van Vliet and Lowry, it's the OKC guards. There's so many of them. DeMar DeRozan you can put at multiple positions. So I think all those guys have upside. You're just then hedging yourself against either Luka and or Harden going for that 60, 65 plus point game on a 4-game slate that you probably need. So I'm personally going stars and scrubs. I'm going to, like, as probably I had some dummy lineups in just with both Luka and Harden in them. And the more value that you get, the easier that is to kind of put together. So I'm going to go stars and scrubs.
All right, final game, 8:00, Dallas, OKC. Obviously, we just got the information, if you're just joining us, that Gallinari will be in the lineup. Schroeder will not have a minutes restriction, as nor Gallinari as well. Don't have the actual lineup yet. I'm still waiting for that. However, though, 220 over-under. It is the second highest over-under of these 4 games tonight. Starting off with the Dallas side of the ball, obviously Luka Doncic, and I would love for you to just speak on him for a second. One of the highest rated players tonight, obviously on this 4-game slate. But he looked a little bit off against the Lakers. And so wanted to ask you, he also took a hard hit, hit his head, also hit his elbow on that fall. Should we be concerned at all as far as the health with Luka tonight given the fact of these two things that have taken place over the last week and a half to him.
Yeah, I think it's definitely concerning to at least point it out. But the fact that he's active today, he got ruled in pretty early. I feel okay just trusting him I have him in for 32 minutes. So it's still not the 34 that you could have felt good projecting him for maybe a month ago before he sustained this injury 3 weeks ago. So yeah, he's not projecting out as he normally would. It's not the greatest of spots for him, but he grades out as just pure projection on points. I have Harden number 1 at just under 57 points, and then I have Luke at 54.5. The next gap from that is Russell Westbrook, which is almost 10 points less. So those guys are on a tier of their own tonight. Like point per dollar wise, Harden's the play up there. But when it comes down to it, you have so much value. At that point, you can put in anything. This is why I'm starting to like the Luka Doncic plus Harden lineups a little bit more now as the value opens up. So Luka, for the point per dollar aspect, no, I don't think he's that great of a play. But when you factor in lower ownership and now the ease of getting to him to just kind of have a higher projected lineup, it starts to become more intriguing.
How about James Harden? I mean, he's 11-5 tonight on FanDuel. And let me see real quick on DraftKings, if I'm not mistaken. He's 10-5. I feel like he's extremely cheap on DraftKings, given the fact that, I mean, he does have the highest projected total tonight. And more importantly, I mean, he has probably the highest upside of all these top tier players. So at 10-5, I mean, it's really hard to ignore him on DraftKings. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's hard to ignore him. He's right behind Bowman as my second highest owned player. As this value continues to open up, it's just going to become more solidified. I was surprised to see where the ownership came in on it. It's really depending on how you want to build your lineups. If you want to go balance, you're obviously avoiding him and Luka tonight. But with all the value that we have, there's so much of it that you're going to find something to hit somewhere if you're playing a lot of lineups that at 10-5, it's just too cheap. It's $1,000 too cheap on this type of a slate. Even with Westbrook playing better, even with Capella back and them being all healthy, it doesn't change the fact that a month ago when they were all healthy, he was being priced around $12,000. So you're getting a clear discount. The ownership, in my opinion, is not following that clear discount. So at 30% ownership on a 4-game slate, him being underpriced, yeah, I like it a lot. I have him in the 60% ownership range right now.
Other guys really from Houston, I don't know if there's really anyone to mention. Capella has now came back from a heel injury. What type of minutes do you project him tonight, being absent the last 2 games?
Yeah, so I put Capella at 34 minutes right now, or 35 minutes. I usually project him for 36. So it'll either usually be 34 or 36 for me. So it's kind of a cop out putting him at 35 just to see what happens. But he still grades out nicely. Again, he's next to all those other bigs. He doesn't have the forward eligibility. So I saw him grading out as really good value. And I get it. It makes, or really good in terms of ownership where the public was on him. I'm pulling it up right now to see what changed. He is currently 21.2% owned, and I'm coming in on Capella at 23%. So around the field. So yeah, every single one of those 7K bigs right now, I'm getting between 20 and 25% of, which it seems like the field is starting to kind of balance around that as well. Ibaka being a little bit higher, but Capella I'm projecting out as normal. If we got any news on a minutes limit, I would have changed some things, but without any of that news, we've seen it in the past. If he comes back, he'll play just normal run. On
the Dallas side of the ball, obviously Porzingis is not as valuable with Doncic on the floor as far as fantasy upside. Still a great fantasy player, however, though. But let's talk about maybe some other guys that are drawing some heavy ownership, such as Dwight Powell at the center position tonight. Where are you at on Dwight Powell being this high owned, and really kind of what's your take on him in this matchup?
Yeah, so right now I don't really have any interest in Powell. I think I have no shares of him, just with all the other value opening up. I want to see what that projects. Is that on FanDuel, you said?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it is FanDuel. He's 5K on FanDuel, or it could be DraftKings actually, because he's 11%. Let me see. All right, well then his ownership has come down a little bit. So it was at 20%, and that has now creeped down to 12. I don't know if that's changed now again. If we had another ownership, we did have one 3 minutes ago, so we can just check again. But he's still drawing ownership though. It's 11.1%. So I mean, he's 5K on FanDuel, and I mean, and you would have to think it's pretty large considering a 4-game slate. And I mean, when you look at the top, I mean, obviously, I think Jokic will draw a majority of that ownership, and then it's spread out between Adams and Thompson. But at 11%, I mean, 5K. I mean, can he get there tonight in this matchup?
So just for Powell, just for all the other value that's out there, I'm just not going to get there right now. I mean, we've seen the production at least over the past 2 or 3 weeks come back up. I think it's directly correlated to an extent with Luka. I mean, Luka leading his team in rebounding rate right now, even ahead of Porzingis. When you take a guy like that off the court, it's going to help a guy like Powell. So I think you'll slowly see him drop back down to that that 0.66 type of fantasy point per minute producer. Naturally, he should be better than that. They signed him to be better than that, but you're not seeing it playing alongside of Porzingis right now. And I think if anything, you have, and if I just look, you probably have at least 4 more value forward / centers that I would put ahead of him and below his price point by a good $500 to $1,500 more.
And then one guy that maybe can be somewhat considered just because of the injury to Hardaway Jr. Don't know if we'll see an increase in minutes, but at least the usage rate is there. Is DeLon Wright, 4,900? Any love for him as far as just like maybe a GBP filler if you're multi-entering? Or I mean, if anything, if you're just looking for a cheap guy to plug in.
Yeah, so I have like, he just made his way into like an exposure for like 2%. So he's in like 1 or 2 of my lineups right now. I have him at 20 minutes, and with Luka being in it, it's just really hard to want to get to him, to get to Brunson. We saw Barea start the second half of their last game. I don't think that really carries over with any sort of significance. But yeah, all these other guard options, maybe Seth Curry, you see spike games out of there. He'd be the only one that I would want to recommend, if anything. But on this slate, once again, when there's Kai Bowmans and all these things, it's really Luka, paying up for him, wanting to prioritize him if that's the way that you're going. I don't think you have to on this slate. And then after that, it's really just the rest of Dallas doesn't stand out. I have just a share or two of Dorian Finney-Smith. Same can be said for Porzingis. Porzingis is the guy who just finds himself in that 7K range where he's probably the one a little bit overpriced, probably the one who goes the most under-owned. So if you wanted to get to him more because of ownership, it makes sense, but it's not severe enough that you have to drastically go there. I think he's probably still $300, $400, $500 overpriced with Luka being back.
Anyone else for this game that you want to touch on or maybe suggest that we didn't really cover?
Let me see. No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, I mean, we have 15 minutes left. Right now, I'm adjusting lineups myself, but when we're looking at it, I really just want to kind of go back and look at Kai Bowman again for a second, and really just maybe look into this a little bit more. Maybe for myself as well. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, but I mean, really, what really can we expect out of Kai Bowman tonight? Because when I look at it from a numbers perspective, I don't necessarily see how much he offers me as far as upside tonight with him not being in the starting lineup. And there's still a lot of guards there that will take a lot of shots, like Burks and Lee, who I think will control the offense, in my opinion. So when it comes to Kai Bowman, though, I mean, where are you at with him as far as a confidence level and obviously like an expectation?
Yeah, so I think I have a good amount of confidence in at least him being 3,100, right? So last time that you had Russell being out, okay, so Luka will play. Last time you had that Russell being out, it ended up being a 37-minute performance off the bench. There was really no foul trouble that spiked that. He just ended up playing well. I don't think it's going to be that high. I'm not projecting that high. I think you see somewhere around 28 to 30 minutes of him off the bench. And at the end of the day, it's not only that you have you have Burke starting and Lee starting, and I have a combination of those guys playing about 64 minutes, 32 on average a piece each. So you're still having a ton of minutes behind each of these guys to be filled by guards. So around 16 or so each, there's 32 minutes off the bench to go around. And I'm just giving the majority of those minutes right now to Kai Bowman. And then you could also see Lee drop down and play some minutes at the 3, which he's done a little bit this year if they wanted to. So I think the main question is, like, at 3,100, yeah, I think he's a really good value. When the ownership is this high, yeah, there's a strong stance to be taken. I'm above it right now. I don't feel so. Like, your question was like, do you feel confident? No, I don't really feel confident in that high for a guy coming off the bench. The only thing that makes it feel better is the low price point on it and what it allows you to do with the rest of your lineup. So wherever you come in on him, I think it's fine. I don't think he's going to end up being the key to this slate just because of how cheap he is. Because I mean, a lot of people talk about it on Awesemo all the time right here. If you're getting a guy at that flat min $3,100 price point and he's a guard, somebody with the ball in his hands to create plays, and I could project him for at least confidently probably 24 minutes, but I'm putting him at 28. He's grading out at a spot that on some of his bad nights, he's still not ruining my lineups at like 18, 19 fantasy points.
Is Fred VanVleet in consideration at all tonight at 8,200 on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's fine. Just he's getting those 38 to 40-minute performances. I actually prefer him on DraftKings to Lowry. I prefer Lowry to VanVleet over on FanDuel. And
then Russell Westbrook, Luka Doncic, James Harden. If you had to pick 2 of the 3 to roster, either site, which 2 of the 3 are you going to roll with together?
Yeah, I would go to Luka and Harden now on DraftKings. I'm trying to do that a little bit more now. Just as the value keeps opening up, you're going to need your value to get you decent performances, and then also for the top end guys to pay off. But it's very rare that you can get those guys that have 70-point ceilings into your lineups on the same night, especially a 4-game slate. So that's what you're banking on at that point. You probably need Luka and Harden to both have those 65 to 70-point nights, but we know that they probably do that once out of every like 5-4 performances. So I would rather have those two rather than like a Harden and Russell Westbrook pairing.
Someone in the Osmo Slack chat wants to know, what's your thoughts on Gallinari tonight? Your true thoughts on him?
Yeah, so Gallo for me, and I was doing this projection. Let me pull it up now. So the immediate thoughts are that if there's going to be no minutes limit, you could put him at somewhere between 30 and 32 minutes, which is completely fine for what you're going to get. He's a guy who doesn't really have a wide variation to his outcomes. So really whatever you put him at as a point per minute producer, 30, 32 minutes, that's around where his fantasy points will be. So it's nothing crazy. The ownership was 5%, seeing now if there's any update, but I have him currently at like 31.5 fantasy points. At that point, he's priced at 6,300. It's not a fantastic play, but if you're going to play it in GPPs at little ownership, I think that's the spot to go to it. I don't think it's a cash play. So at that point, it doesn't grade out as great value. I'll probably have like 8% of him once I update this.
Your thoughts on Terrence Davis from Toronto tonight in a FanDuel GPP lineup?
Yeah, I think Davis for GPPs makes some sense. He's like one of the guys who's not picking up too much steam at all. He's also one of those guys with the rotation getting a little bit weird that might see some more run, even more than OG off the bench, and I wouldn't be shocked. It's not something I have a lot of interest in, but he's just a piece of value that can get you those 20-point performances, just like all the other value, and except he's like I don't know, an eighth of the ownership right now.
Tristan Thompson, would you rather have him over Steven Adams, FanDuel GPP?
I would rather have Steven Adams.
All right. Any questions that you're seeing in the YouTube chat? Because I've just been on Slack right now, just seeing, not seeing anything. Oh, DFS Barton or GR3 Danilo?
So wait, out of those three, or is it a 2v2? I would take Barton.
All right. We got 10 minutes left, guys. Still waiting. Maybe. Are we waiting on anything else? I'm trying to just see.
Do we have all the lineups? I think that if anything, it would just be. Do we have the Magic lineup yet?
The Magic?
Not the Magic, the Mavs lineup.
Oh, I was gonna say what? No, still waiting on it. I guess what you're are you trying to speak on Seth Curry or not?
No, I was just wondering. Like, I think the only news that we have is that 8:00 game, and we probably won't get any lineups, and really nothing should be that different, depending on just getting the news that everything on Gallo, he should be no minutes limit. I would expect him to start. We got that news actually, I think. So yeah, I think we're just waiting on the Mavs lineup, and nothing should be weird there.
Here's a question for you: Seth Curry or Kai Bowman on FanDuel? They're basically the same price.
Seth Curry or Bowman? I would go Bowman.
You would go Bowman?
Yeah.
All right. Trying to see here. Anything else? Nothing's really popping up. What about your 3 low-owned GBP plays tonight that you like?
That's a good question. Let me get to it. Let me update the ownership here. So what do you want to go? Like single digits or like 15? Or I guess on a 4-game slate, probably like 15% or below.
Probably 15 or below. And then also like maybe 110 or below would be interesting.
Yeah, so I think Luka at 14.5% with all the value. I mean, any night that you're getting him at that low ownership, it makes sense because of the price, but I think that's completely fine. I do like that. Going down a little bit more, I think that Hollis Jefferson, if he's going to stay somewhere around 10%, last update was 7 minutes ago, I think that number comes up. But if he's going to stay 9.6%, I have him at 28 minutes. I have him grading out for like around 26 fantasy points, and even that might be a low number on it, and that grades out really well. So 10% on, so RHJ, Luka, and then a little bit more. I think Paul Millsap at 8% is still fine. Just getting the news now that he's starting at center. Probably not going to pick up more. That's probably the single digit guy. Millsap at 8%. And then I will say, we talked about him earlier, but Eric Pascal at 7.7%. You're getting him at 3,400. I have him for 22 minutes, but you can easily see him play, honestly, 30 minutes in this one, depending what the bench rotations look like. And if he ends up being the first man off the bench, if Chris gets into foul trouble against Aldridge, he's probably a guy who steps in with Spellman. So I think that Pascal has a pretty nice range of outcomes today, and it's not going to be accounted for in ownership.
All right. I got about 7 minutes here. Just trying to figure out these last bit of lineups before we go ahead and fire them up for the 7 o'clock start time. Anything you want to talk about this slate while I'm going ahead and finishing this up? Because this is a little bit tough to kick it back and forth when you're trying to fix this like the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I got it. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me that I was just trying to run, and it's happening in some lineups, maybe a little bit less than I actually would like, but I touched on it a couple of times, just trying to get to like the 2 top studs on this slate. And just based on how much the mid-range is loaded, I was intrigued by getting to like a lot of Harden and Luka lineups, and I still am. I'm getting to in like 150, probably the combination of those guys together, like 15 times right now. So like 10%, which is, I guess I'm okay with that, but I'm not getting to more of it. And I guess the biggest thing on that is just the mid-range is so loaded, whether it's the whole 7K power forward and center position, or then you have the 8K and 7K guards, that it's just not needed when a guy like Luka Doncic can grade out for 55 points tonight, but so many guys are grading out somewhere around the 45-point range, 44-point range, that if you're building one lineup, I think it's fine. But if you're somebody entering a ton of lineups, you're probably not getting to a lot of it unless you're really sort of forcing it in there then.
All right. Still working on this as we go along.
Yeah, definitely. No, you're fine. So I think that, yeah, I have Luka. I have Luka at 30. So I saw somebody ask earlier if there was like any concern for, and we talked about it a little bit, just Luka playing more minutes. And I have him at 32 minutes tonight, which you could probably project him there all year long. There were times where you can put him at 34, but we haven't really seen that much since he's come back, also dealing with a wrist/back injury. I have him at 32, and if you put him at 34, yeah, he would grade out definitely better than right now, and probably grade out a little bit better than Harden, at least pure points wise. So if you feel that confident in the minutes coming back up tonight individually, then yeah, I think it's even better to get to both of them in lineups. Somebody asked Capella or Love. I currently have right now like 2% more Love, so I'll take Love in like a single lineup there.
Man, it's hard not to go with some of these Golden State guys, man. Looking at it, it's just so intriguing, especially Burks and Lee, man. I just feel like a majority of the shots and usage will run through these two guys.
Yeah. I really like Burks tonight at the price point, especially when he's starting at point guard. I mean, a lot of people do. I prefer him over Lee just because of the price difference. Burks was still taking like 12 to 14 shots a game, even when he was playing 25 minutes with D'Angelo Russell and Lee taking shots. Now with no Russell out there and starting at the point guard position, I would think Burks takes somewhere in the 20s in shots range. And at 5,300, it's just too cheap. Kai Bowman, because of the price, is the guy I'll have the most of. Same thing with Chris. But if you're asking me just to pick one guy for just really most points on this entire team, it'd probably end up being Burks. I prefer Burks even over a guy like Draymond.
Any love for like Bryn Forbes, McCaw, like some of these low guys on DK? Do they present or provide any value for you? And Torrey Craig is starting in the lineup, by the way.
Yeah, Craig's starting, and just so to answer the question, some Forbes, I have like 4%, nothing of McCaw, but Torrey Craig starting, I still don't get to any of it. He can go out there and get like a 4-steal game and just have a great defensive game and get you there that way, but at the minimum price. But if he's not doing that, he's pretty useless. I think at that point, I have him grade out for like around 15 fantasy points. So at 3K, he hits you your value, but just because Bowman's on the slate with that guy projected for around 20 fantasy points and a little bit more stability in probably the minutes, it's not a spot that I'm getting to any Craig right now. I think if anything, it just helps the pieces around him. It's funny because Torrey Craig filling in for Gary Harris, at least for fantasy purposes, it's really not a major change. They're both guys who in real life are meaningful for teams, but they don't really change too much for themselves in like point per minute production.
How much of a priority tonight is Serge Ibaka?
Yeah, so earlier in the day, he was a priority for me. Then I just changed like some of the rates and looked more into the minutes. And I feel more comfortable putting him at 32 minutes than like the 34 or 35 you've seen a couple of times. And when that happens, he's just as much of a priority for me as Kevin Love, Aldridge, and Clint Capella. So relative to the Fields ownership, he's the highest owned of that whole group. I think he's coming in still around like 27%. We have Aldridge at like 23%. Kevin Love's down at 18%. So if you're playing like one lineup tonight, I would probably rather have Kevin Love than Serge Ibaka. I have them for the exact same amount of fantasy points tonight, and Love is more expensive, but he's also lower owned by almost 10%.
All right, we're getting down here to the final 2 minutes. Anyone else we should speak of? Anything else that we didn't cover before we go ahead and kind of wrap up this final live before lock before the end of the year?
Yeah, I know, but it's crazy, right? 2020 is about to be here in 5 hours here. I was going to say on the East Coast, but Actually, no, it's 8 hours for you. Time still works over there differently. Yeah. So I think we hit the nail on some of the top guys. Chris is coming in now at like 60% owned, and I understand why the ownership's getting there, starting at the 5. His minutes are nowhere near stable. Now, he's a great fantasy point per minute producer. So if he saw like a peak 26, 28-minute game, and I'm not expecting that, yeah, he would be needed, and the 60% would be justified, and the 40% that don't have him, it's on them. But I do think if you're trying to get different, every piece of ownership that comes in on a player, every percentage point makes them that much worse of a play when it comes to playing against tens of thousands of people in tournaments. So with RHJ opening up, I can project RHJ for similar to more minutes than Chris for similar fantasy point per minute production. So yeah, if you're going to get RHJ, and I'm still waiting to see if we get an ownership update, but the last one was about 10 minutes ago. If he does stabilize at like a 10% clip, even if he comes up to 20, 30% and be half the ownership as Chris, if you're playing like one lineup, I think that's a spot that you can pivot even in more than that. But yeah, Chris, once you start to get to 60% ownership on guys that the minutes in this rotation can go anywhere. And even if they do go there and they're fine and Chris plays 24 and produces you 25 fantasy points, I still think it's something that RHJ can match or beat at a fraction of the ownership. So I think that's a pretty big spot to hit on, because he's by far and away the highest owned player in the slate by almost 15, 20% at this point.
All right, man. 2, 1. That's it. It is officially locked. Yeah, it's officially locked. Went a little different. I mean, I did a lot of the qualifiers tonight for FanDuel. And then outside of that, I mean, the normal single entries. And I didn't do the mass GBP tonight just because with live before lock, it's really difficult. And honestly, I highly recommend no one do it. It's really hard to kind of bounce back and forth. But man, on DraftKings, I definitely stuck with the stars and scrubs approach. I locked in Doncic and Harden.
I like that. Yeah, no, I like that. It's like if you try and put it into projection systems, it probably started popping up more for you at like 6:30 if somebody was trying to use an optimizer just because of the extra value. But you probably also had to manipulate it too. Like I ended up putting Luka for just like that extra 1 or 2 minutes just to get him in some more of my lineups with Harden. But yeah, I think it's fine on such a small slate. Like if this was a 10-game slate, I don't feel the need to do that. But if Luka and Harden were to go for a combined, say 130 between the two of them, it's so hard to make up for that elsewhere. And even if your value isn't going for 30 or 40 point nights. So yeah, I'm happy that I ended up filling this show because it made me not play as much. Yesterday was I believe yesterday was my best day of the year for NBA. And whenever that happens for me, I just get too excited to play the next day, try and play everything. And then that's usually
what happened, bro? We didn't, tell us what happened. It was your best day.
Yeah, it was the best day of this. It was the best day of this year so far. So not that long. It's just two months of the season. But
what did you ship?
It's just like I play like mainly 3 max and single entries. So a couple of those ended up going right. Just you end up having a 55-point McCaw and Jan Mahimni night, and it goes a good way early. I ended up going to bed, so I didn't even sweat it. There's been too many nights when I've been disappointed in how, and I've talked to you about this before, whether it's baseball. I think I was 2 points away from one of the bigger wins in that night, needed something from an Albert Pujols. He struck out 4 times that night, got nothing. Things like that. So now I've been like anti sweating. So whenever something happens, I expect the worst. So I ended up just going to bed. I woke up at just like 5 a.m. It was the first thing I looked at, and it was pretty good. It was a pretty good morning. So yeah, just a couple of single entry and 3 max tournaments. A couple of sort of mid stakes and then a lot of lower stakes.
I love that, man. I'm doing so tonight, the $100 single entry on FanDuel, just to give you an idea, guys. 47% Harden is the ownership, 71% Kyle Lowry. Marquise Chris is 80.4% Sal out of 250 people.
Wow.
Jokic, 27%. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, only 23. I don't know if maybe people didn't switch enough in time. Alec Burks is 80%. And then outside of that, I mean, still trying to look at the rest of these ownerships. But yeah, man, Marquise Chris, 80.4%. I'm not going to lie. I didn't go Marquise Chris in the single entry. I went Rondae Hollis-Jefferson instead. So it's very interesting to see him that high. It's really, you don't know what you're going to get with Chris, man. And I'd rather kind of fade that.
That was the $100 single entry?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I have the $19 pulled up. So we have 3 of these 4 games. So this is actually good because we have most of the ownerships, because I'm sure a lot of people want to see just what that looks like. But Chris, at least in the $19, so lower stakes, he comes in 63, 64% there. So yeah, you're playing a single entry. So I guess it's not the exact comparison to sort of like the sharper field, because if they had 150, I don't know if they would be doing the same thing in there. But yeah, I mean, we can go through some of the ownership. I have it pulled up now for the main tournament. I think it's like the end of the year one, the $19, the decade ender.
Oh yeah, I'm in that one too. Let me see. That's on DK. So let's pull that up too real quick. Yeah, Harden's 51%. Millsap is only 9%.
That's right around. They had him. We also had him, I think, at 7.7 or 8%. Yeah, I think that's a good play on a 4-game slate that's not getting looked at.
Let's see who else is big. Marquise Chris is 64%.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Kevin Love is 30%. Pascal is 10%. Kai Bowman is 40%. DeRozan's 30%. I'm actually kind of shocked to see him that high, given his price point. But Jamal Murray's 13%. Ibaka's 25%. Draymond 29%. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, Will Barton 27%.
Yeah. So I like 23% ended up being the number on Hollis Jefferson, and I mean, I have him projected for 28. You can tell me that he plays 24, but him entering the starting lineup, it definitely secures his minutes. I do like that a lot. I'm going to probably say more times than not, he plays equal to more minutes than Chris. So if you're going to give me him at right now, a third of the ownership is what Marquise Chris is coming in at. Yeah, I like that a lot right now. I know he's starting at the 4, not the 5, but similar positionality.
I just feel like production wise and fantasy point per minute wise, I just feel like RHJ is a better play, and I'd rather have him at that lower ownership.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just scrolling down a little bit more. I saw somebody in chat said that Podol ended up being 3% instead of like 8. So I guess I ended up above the field at 4% of him. Nothing major there. Anything else that stands out? Jokic ends up being 19% on this type of a slate. That actually feels good if you're somewhere around that or above. I'm well below that. I'm like half the field on Jokic tonight. Ibaka came in at 20. So I want to see what happens with these 7K forwards that we have. We have Aldridge at 22. We have Love at 28. So Love ended up being the highest owned of this group, which probably wasn't expected. And then Ibaka in the middle at 25. I have the most Love, so seeing him that high, not as great, but they all pretty much graded out right around that 25% ownership range.
Oh man, dude. I wanted to go and rock Doncic Harden on FanDuel, and I didn't. I just went Harden. So hopefully that doesn't get me, but I did fade Jokic on FanDuel as well. I did go Jokic on DraftKings and some, but not too much. I felt like there was other ways I wanted to spend my money tonight, but I kind of wish, based on that ownership, maybe I would want a little bit more than what I previously anticipated.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's fair. So I'm really curious to look into this after the fact, and probably not going to be to tomorrow, to see how many people paired the Harden and Luka lineups together.
Dude, people are laughing at the size of my my bottle, but just to give you an idea, like, look, it's pretty dope. They give you the times that you got to drink the water. So I had to hit the 4 p.m. because it's 4 p.m. here. So I had to hit the 4 p.m. mark, and so it was time to drink. It's pretty legit.
Is that like, I mean, obviously to stay hydrated, but does the exact timing of it create any other sort of a efficiency?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on like what your workout regimen is. I started this new thing for the new year, so I'm trying to like really be precise about it.
Gotcha. No, yeah, that's cool. I used to have something a lot smaller, but when I was back in high school and playing sports, we were on like similar types of schedules.
Well, man, I think that's it, man. I listen, for everyone in here, Happy New Year. Have a wonderful night. Don't drink and drive. If you do drink, have fun. Take some tequila shots. It's always a great thing. But other than that, we just want to thank you for a wonderful year, guys. We want to thank you for just really supporting us. And Sal, it's been a pleasure working with you, man, and getting to know you, and really just getting into this industry more and more each and every single day.
Yeah, man, I could say the same thing about you. It's been a ton of fun, and yeah, definitely I'll echo the same things. Definitely don't drink and drive. Have a fun time tonight. I get to go watch an Acorn drop, and then I got to do a show with Josh, I think at like 9:30 in the morning tomorrow. So probably not the wildest of tequila shot nights for me, but we'll see where we get. Yeah,
and for everyone in here, don't forget, continue to give us a thumbs up, like this page, subscribe, and have a beautiful, happy new year. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Fantasy Draft. Thank you to everyone at Osmo.com for a beautiful year. Sal, where can we go ahead and find you for those of us in here that don't know where you are?
Yeah, you could just follow me on Twitter at SalVetri and then I also have a YouTube channel. I do content as well. Just Sal Vetri if you are interested.
All right. Well, listen, man. You know, what a way to close out the year with the last show on Awesemo.com. Beautiful show, man. Always a pleasure. Everyone, take care. Have a great night and Happy New Year, everyone.